And we will now resume proceedings in Finance Committee. Please be seated. Before we took the lunch break, we were discussing appropriations to the Minister of Education, Employment and Gender Affairs, and in particular, appropriation EGA 2, job placement and employer support activities for $1,089,790. And at the time, they were discussing questions from Mr. Bush. I think the question had been asked, and Mr. Bush, if you would like to repeat the question, just so we can be certain that the answer is directly related to the question that was asked.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I got several.
But
And the one that we were dealing with was the suspension. Since the investigation was, don't know where that was going, and the staff member in Cayman is still suspended, what have they done to find out whether the staff member was correct in doing their job, or whether the person that the complaint that they got, Mr. Chairman, whether there's any truth to the complaint? Who is right, who's wrong, and when can we expect that that matter will be settled and somebody and the staff member will go back to work?
thank you, Mr. Bush. Ms. Rodriguez.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair. I think the first point that I would like to make, Mr. Chair, is to clarify that the employee has not been suspended. The employee is on required leave following the receipt of a complaint by the director of the DLP, who found the allegations to be of a significantly serious enough nature to take this action. And as members will be aware, an appointing officer has the authority to put an employee on required leave where the appointing officer deems it to be in the public interest to do so. And I think it's very, very important to say that this action, and that is the action of putting an employee on required leave, is not contingent upon the innocence or guilt of the employee. This is simply a step that's taken to allow the matter to be investigated, where it's judged necessary for the officer not to remain in office during that time. The second half of the question asked about progress in relation to this matter. What I can advise, of course, it's always important, Mr. Chairman, to say that it's important for due process to take place. And at this time, the employee has retained legal counsel, so has the complainant. The DLP has been responding to both attorneys as well as their own legal counsel. There's investigation ongoing, an in-house investigation. The team is also collecting evidence from the attorneys, and I am advised by the director that at this stage it's anticipated that the investigation itself should conclude within another 30 days, and with a final decision by the director to be delivered within the potential next 60 days.
And so, Mr. Chairman, this is of a nature that can't be said what this required leave is for. Now, bear in mind that there is knowledge of the situation up there about complaints with staff from that particular, the person that made complaints, that there's that staff from 30 work permits, and that there at certain points up until this year, there were still no pension benefits or sick benefits. There were pregnant women who complained about it, and one such matter went to legal advice too. So those are the kind of things that I am concerned about, and can you tell me whether that is so? I don't want to get into calling names. I don't cotton to that in this committee or in the House, but I would certainly want to know whether, in fact, there is a case of no pension benefits, there is a case of 30 work permits, and there is a case of no sick benefits, health benefits.
Is there a question there?
Mr. Chair, through you, I'm just wondering if the member would be amenable to hold that particular question until we're dealing with the Department of Labor and Pension matters. It might be more appropriate to discuss it then, to the extent that any of those details can be.
I guess I could, but we are talking about job placement, and certainly the one with the work permits can be had here as well. Yes, I can hold our question there, but I'm leery of that, because your government will shut me down with all your numbers. That's what they've been doing. Can't move motions, you can't do anything. You rise here with trepidation.
Thank you, Mr. Bush.
So where I would go at this point, Mr. Chairman, is the aspect of the work permits. And if there are 30 work permits existing in Cayman Brac. On that one that we're dealing with, we don't need to call names, right?
Ms. Rodriguez?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think obviously the focus, what I'm reporting on here, is about a complaint that was made and an investigation that is ongoing. So it would not be appropriate for me to comment on any aspect of the investigation. We need to let that follow due process. In terms of any specifics that are outside of this investigation, you're asking about other aspects. That may be something that you may wish to follow up with the Director of DLP in regards to those matters.
Mr. Chairman, I am asking it because we are dealing with job placement and employee support activities. And so throughout this whole finance committee, we've been trying to get around these things of I'm not responsible, or this is on the investigation, and all these nice excuses. So I am trying on this matter, separate and apart now from the investigation. I'll come back to that when we get to the other appropriation. But on the job placement, are you aware then that there are one company with 30 employees on work permit? Is that so? Do you know anything about it? If you don't know, call in the deputy. He might know. The Deputy Premier, that is.
Mr. Chair, through you, the question of the number of work permits allocated to any employer otherwise would be with the Immigration Department. We don't, at the NWDA, that is, because that's the appropriation we're dealing with now, we don't actually keep, nor is it within our kind of remit and mandate to keep the numbers with respect to work permits. So if the member has a specific question related to this employer and the number or level of activity with respect to work permits, it would be most appropriate to have dealt with that when we were talking under the area of immigration, when that appropriation was discussed.
That might be appropriate, but I'm sorry, there is a thing as joined up government. And the minister does have a vote here that on this under consideration called job placement and employee support to improve access to the employment for Caymanian job seekers, both employed and unemployed, including assigning the seekers through registering, assessing, and providing career guidance and counseling, processing, job match, on and on and on, Minister. And all I'm asking is, do you know, as the Minister, do you know if any of your subordinates know? Any of the chief officer, anybody knows? Do they have a company in Cayman Brac with 30 job work permits?
Mr. Chair, as I...
If she can't answer,
Ms. Rivers,
she can't.
if you don't know the answer, you don't know the answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I said, that's information we would have to request from the Immigration Department. We don't keep that information to hand in the various databases that we maintain at the
And
end
under
of the
that
day.
investigation, you don't know nothing about it either. That's cool. I understand.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I've heard on several occasions, I'm not sure whether it's monthly or quarterly, about the NWDA visiting the Northside Library. Can you give me the times that you spend there and how many clients you've actually interviewed so far this year?
Through the chair, the Northside Library was visited on April 7th, 2014, and again on May 12th, 2014. The ESO that goes out spends half a day. I don't know the exact time that they're out there. I know that the email that is sent to the MLAs to let them know that an employment services officer will be visiting the district has that information. The library shares that information with their patrons, and it's put out on CS messages to let individuals know the times of those visits.
Dr. Garcia, if you could please state the full name. I think the ESO is...
Employment Services Officer, sir.
Right, and the reason I'm asking you to do that is because it's already accepted in the country that ESO is the Economics and Statistics Office, so not to introduce any confusion. Thank you.
No problem. When we visited on April 7th, no clients attended for services on that day. On May 12th, 2 clients from the District of Northside visited and requested services on that day.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I wonder if the Deputy Chief Officer would consider changing the times from 10 o'clock till 2 o'clock in the day, because I think that's the reason you're not getting any clients.
Through the chair, we are happy. The email that is sent out to MLAs invites any feedback, and that's certainly feedback that we'll be happy to take back. The schedule was set to facilitate other activities of that employment services officer, but we can certainly look at the schedule, and as per the email, we invite the feedback of the MLAs and in their respective districts so that we can ensure that the services we provide meet the needs of your constituents.
If there are no further questions, we'll proceed to vote.
Mr. Chairman, maybe they can say with some clarity, what are since this person is on required leave, who's standing to the shop up there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the DLP has made arrangements for staff to visit in Cayman Brac on a regular basis, and I think the first visit has already happened. So they have made arrangements for servicing client needs through visits, but also, I understand, through relationships established with the Department of Commerce, with immigration, and the business sector in Cayman Brac. And I think also notices have gone out, so individuals are aware that they can email or call directly to the DLP Grand Cayman office for support as well. I understand another visit is being planned, and that's quite imminent. In terms of the NWDA, work and the contribution that officer would have made as well. There are steps being taken to ensure that there are some services being provided as well. Already staff have visited the BRAC, participated in a job fair. They've met with immigration and conducted a training to ensure that they were well acquainted with immigration interface. In addition, another visit has happened with the Employment Services Manager visiting, again meeting with immigration, and I understand that visit also meeting with some job seekers, and as the Deputy mentioned earlier, there's an ad that's going to be going out that will inform clients on the BRAC as well as Grand Cayman about the range of services that are available to them online and otherwise. So hopefully that will also help. And another visit, the DCO has informed me that another visit again from members of the Grand Cayman team is imminent. Thank you.
I know what Moses got on the screen.
Thank you very much. All those in favor of EGA2, job placement and employer support activities, so $1,089,790 standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Aye. And those against, no. EGA 3, employment regulatory activities, $1,083,345 on page 193. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chair, before we go to that, I'd just like to thank the Deputy Chief Officer and also previously the Director of Sunrise Centre and the Director of Library Services for their assistance with their respective votes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to join the Minister in thanking them as well, and also thanking Dr. Tasha. I've worked with her on the NWDA task force, and she's done a tremendous job, and I think she should be publicly congratulated for what she's accomplished this year, along with the other staff in the department.
Thank you. EGA 3, employment regulatory activities, $1,083,345 on page 193. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Bush?
direct back to Cayman Brack. Can the director tell us what is being done, or does he know of the situation that I'm inquiring into?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, honorable members.
Thank you.
Mario Ebanks, Director of Labor and Pensions and Acting Pension Superintendent. Mr. Chairman, through you to the honorable member's question, as the Chief Officer explained just momentarily, the department and myself, we have established a investigation team to probe into this matter, and the team has had some delays because of illnesses and other activities, but they are working on dealing with the matter, and I certainly don't want to be drawn into specifics, would not be appropriate, but they are not immaterial, and they need to be properly investigated. And the department and the ministry obviously is committed to the sister islands. We have gone there, we've had visits, we've had training sessions, we have developed good relationships with businesses in those two sister islands. And it's unfortunate that they've had this bump in the road. We are dealing with it and ensuring service to those islands and ensuring that the vision of the department and the aspirations of employers and employees are fully protected and represented.
Mr. Chairman, I like that, but what about the company with the 30 permits? Tell me about that. That's what I'm asking, please. Do the director know of this company existing in Cayman Brack with 30 work permits? Does he know if there exists any health benefits or pension benefits?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you. Mr. Chairman, we are only guided by the information that comes from the officer on the ground. And that officer on the ground is Senior Labor Officer, who is now on required leave. And we have only received one complaint I'm aware of over the last few months or over the last year from one lady, and with the help of Grand Cayman officer in the department, that matter was resolved, and the rights of the employee was protected. In terms of the number of work permits that they have and other complaints, there is a process for complaints to come to the department. Before this required leave, those complaints went through the officer in the back, and as I said, only one complaint was officially filed that we are aware of.
Does the director know if there is that company with 30 work permits? And if he does he know whether their pay is inclusive of those benefits or not?
Mr. Chairman, through you again, sir. The information that we have would only be mined or made available through the work of the officer in the BRAC, working in the field, conducting inspections, and going out on information audits. In terms of the registration of business, which is required under the labor law, looking at their benefits, whether they comply with the labor law, all of that should be done in a normal course of things. So if we have an officer who is doing the job and going out there, if there are those kinds of issues of that magnitude, it should have come to light a long time ago. But it hasn't come to light, so it indicates to me that somebody has dropped the ball.
Mr. Chairman, I certainly want to agree with the member that they ought to know, but I'm asking him, I certainly know. And if I know, I figure he know too. So does he know? And does he know about this company? Because I don't want to tell me about it. The company don't exist and she don't have third work permits, because I know that. What I'm inquiring is, does your organization know anything about the health benefits or the pension benefits? The director does know about the investigation and everything surrounding with that company and the employee being involved. Nobody need to try to say that don't exist, because it does. I don't know what you call it, required leave. Up at the airport, they call it something else. I don't know what you all call it, but call it whatever. But there is somebody that did that work that is not doing the work now. And it was because of that situation. That's what the investigation was about. But because of all that situation, now maybe other things, I don't know, but part of that is because of that, because of the situation with the suspended or on required leave employee.
Mr. Chairman, we only have one complaint that we are aware of. Mr. Chairman, through you, if the honourable member is aware of any specifics, certainly we would look into that. But the officer on the ground, with the support of Grand Cayman office, is meant to do those kinds of investigations and inspections, whether they're off-site or on-site, and we're only aware of one. Now, I am aware, as a result of this complaint, about the operator of the business, but we have not got to the point of drilling into all of the facts as of yet. And I just want to add also that health benefits is really under the remit of the Health Insurance Commission, even though in the Department of Labor and Pensions, and especially in the case of Cayman Brac, when we go out to do inspections and audits, we look at all those other benefits, but it's only labor and pensions that we are constitutionally or legally required to enforce.
Mr. Chairman, the members and the chief officer spoke, the director and the chief officer spoke about this person who made a complaint. Can you say that some of that complaint was about pregnancy benefits?
Mr. Chairman, through you, I wonder if the honourable member would provide some more context, because that's a very broad context.
That she had no pregnancy benefits, no health benefits. That was a complaint. I can't make it broad about pregnancy. Everybody know what that is. Either you're pregnant or you're not. No difference.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I'm still a little bit at sea in regard to the context, but we did have a complaint. The one complaint that I'm aware of, which I declared earlier, was in relation to obviously a lady, a European lady who was pregnant, but in the normal course of the employment relationship, she decided to return home. There was some question about when she would receive the benefits that she was due, and the officer in the BRAC dealt with the matter, sought the advice of an officer in Grand Cayman, and the matter was resolved. That file is essentially closed, but I think it would be a stretch to say that that particular complaint triggered the larger complaint as received, because it was much more widespread than that one incident.
Oh yeah, I know. I know that the whole thing was much more widespread. You're absolutely right. I agree with you. Anyway, Mr. Chairman, they asked me, I must put it in some context. I think I can't spread it out any wider. The company's there. They have 30 work permits. I understand there is no, up until March, there was no no benefits, health, or pensions. And instead of you all asking me about the wider context, let me ask you all to go and find out. You all go find out whether that company asks to the minister responsible for district administration, because I think they have some capacity to knowledge of what obtains in Cayman Brac, and in particular with planning and all those other areas. I'm not quite sure whether the work permit board itself, but I know the labor office as it existed, they know about it. So ask the minister too.
Thank you, Mr. Bush.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to say that we certainly will look into that, but as I said before, the officer who was there up until April, as part of her remit as well to ensure compliance.
Thank you. Mr. McLean, did you have a question, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I wanted to possibly, through you, to the minister, and if she so wishes for the director to do it, that's fine, to walk us through this complete process when an employee complains to his department or the board. What happens?
Mr. Chair, through you, I will ask the director to give that explanation to the member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, through you, I just want to make it clear that this particular matter is not with an employee of the department making a complaint to the director. This is an outside individual making a complaint against an officer of the department. So I'm really at sea now in terms of context.
Well,
Context, does she have
well, I thought we had erased our minds from that sea voyage. But what I am talking about, there are many instances where employees complain on their employer to your department, and that's the process I want.
Thank you, sir. Sorry about that.
that on your mind?
Mr. Chairman, through you, a complaint that comes in, the law actually explains the process and also what triggers it, but essentially somebody can come into the office or they can ask for it to be emailed to them, and an official complaint form is sent to that person, or they come into the office, they meet with an officer, and the officer does a pre-screening and then takes the complaint and signs it and ensures that the information is correct. And the form also reminds the complainant that the information that they are providing will also be made available to the employer, which is standard practice and also in accord with human rights. And they agree to that. Otherwise, they don't make a complaint. But of course, if they make the move to come to the office, they're serious about the complaint. That complaint then is required to be sent to the employer within 30 days of receiving it. The employer is normally given, a certain time. You normally do it 14 days for them to then provide their reply in writing with evidentiary material to refute the employee's complaint. The entire package then is reviewed by a senior labor officer to establish whether there is merit on either side or both sides or no merit. And then it comes to the director with a recommendation that the matter needs to be resolved or attempted to be resolved by conciliation and mediation. I then as a director, take that file and work with the officer who's assigned to that complaint. And within a period of not exceeding 90 days, we try to resolve it. And in many cases, and the data will support it, we have resolved many of those cases without going to a tribunal. If after 90 days, the complainant does not abandon or drop that complaint, or if it's not resolved, it's then sent to a tribunal, a labor tribunal, if the case obviously has merit, which by that time we'd have established it had merit. and then it goes to a tribunal. The tribunal secretary has to schedule the case within 30 days of receiving the referral from the department or from one of the officers, and then a hearing is scheduled, and within 28 days of that hearing, the tribunal chairman should render a reasoned written ruling. And then, of course, there's a right of appeal as well, but that's the process. Trying to walk you through, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I wonder if the director can tell us, I'm at the appeal stage now, how many are outstanding and how long they have been outstanding? Keeping in mind that we're talking 30, 14, 90, 28 days. By that time, most people have moved on life, much less in death. And there's no need for it, but I wouldn't mind knowing how many are outstanding. And if he wants to break them down since this year and in previous years and time, then fine. But
Can I ask that I'm conscious of time, and we haven't made a whole lot of progress. So I just want to say that when members are asking questions, if you could be precise in the question you're asking and only repeat the question if it's for the sake of clarity, if someone does request. And for the witnesses who are providing the answers, if you could please be as concise and precise with your answers so that we can make good progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is the question the appeals that are outstanding, or the tribunal cases, or both?
you give us it all, but that was in the interest of time here.
Mm-hmm. I just have to dig through my papers here. I do have it. Mr. Chairman, in June of 2013, we had 8 cases that were convened. Of those, we had 1 outstanding decision, 2 appeals, and then we had a couple of other, then the others were resolved. July 2013, we had 1 appeal, one hearing. August, none. September, none. October 2013, 1. November 2013, 5. December, 3. January 2014, 4. February of 2014, 7. March 2014, 4. April 2014, 8 labor appeals hearings, and none in May. So the total of 41 hearings convened during the period of June 2013 to May 2014. The appeals, I'll give you some statistics. In 2010, we had 12 appeals filed. All were completed in that year. 2011, 14 were filed and completed by May 2011. And 12 appeals were done as of May 2013, and 11 appeals were done as of January 2014. In 2014, Mr. Chairman, we've only received 2 appeals for 2014 year. 1 case awaits the appointment of a new deputy chairman. 1 case awaits listing in October 2014, because that's the timing agreed by the parties. And that is the summary of the tribunals and the labor appeal tribunals statistics.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask Mr. Ebanks how many of these appeals are outstanding because the appeals have not met. The appeals board has not met.
In 2013, we received, I'll just give you some data so the answer will become obvious, I think. 2013, we received 9 appeals. Three cases were withdrawn after filing. 1 case was completed. 2 cases await listing on the appointment of a new deputy chair. 2 cases await listing probably will be heard in July of this year. And 1 case awaits a file from a DLP for further explanation from a DLP. So it looks like we have 5, it looks like we have 7 cases that are pending appeal at this point in time.
Mr. Chairman, that's 7 out of 9 from 2013. Can the director tell us why this is? I mean, I can understand the appointment of a deputy, but why do we have these outstanding? People's lives are important here. In many instances, it's about money and also the ability to get another job because of the accusations leveled against the person.
Thank you.
Mr. Eubanks.
Mr. Chairman, through you. I hear what the honourable member is saying, and it is a matter that we are also pushing very aggressively to resolve. Mr. Chairman, the fact is that the Labour Tribunal members, as the Labour Appeals Tribunal members, they're all volunteers, and we have a outstanding chairman in Mr. Hugh Moses. There was a time when he was able to use the offices of his firm to arrange the typing of large volumes of transcripts. But he's moved on to another firm, and so as a result, the DLP has been required to type transcripts. And as members may know, detailed transcripts are required for appeals, and sometimes it involves a couple of days of hearings, and we've had some technical difficulties, technology difficulties as well with providing some of those. But the other issue is to do with conflicts, where a chairman may be conflicted, and because a deputy chair, which has happened recently, has left the territory, there's nobody else to fill in. And so the committee is paralyzed, or the tribunal is paralyzed. So we're working as the department, we're working closely with the ministry and the Honourable Minister to try to regularize all these appointments and shifting around. And once that's done, it'll move things forward, but we're at the mercy of volunteers. Unless, Mr. Chairman, the infrastructure is changed to allow for a different model to take place in regard to adjudicating these complaints.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the, what I call DPL.
DLP.
The Labour Law 2011 revision, Section 4, deals with gratuities. Can the director say how this section of the law is administered?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you. I just want to get the context. You said Section 4?
Part 4 of the whole. There's a whole part of the law that provides from Section 30. I can give you the sections if you want. From Section 34 all the way up to.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have the law here as well.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, the department has, whether it is through the registration of businesses or whether it is through inspections, the department has gone out and collected a list of all the establishments that collect gratuities, and an officer has been assigned as the point of contact for a portfolio of businesses that collect gratuities. And we have, under the law, there's been a number of schemes that have been established, And those schemes have been around for a number of years, and they were agreed years ago between the government and at that time the Restaurant Association, but it's since been adopted by the Tourism Association. And each of these organizations are required to file their scheme with the department that complies with one of those 4 approved schemes. And every month, as the law provides, there's a reporting requirement where establishments have to send in their salary information and their gratuity distribution information. That is received. The officer responsible for that establishment then inputs that into a spreadsheet and is analyzed, and providing that there's no difficulties or no incorrect information or incorrect application of that scheme, then it is filed. But if there is an issue, the officer will conduct an inspection to follow up. And there are regular on-site inspections as well as information requests that we call off-site audits conducted on gratuities to ensure that those persons who collect are properly distributing the gratuities in accordance with the law and with the approved, agreed schemes.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, has any employer ever been convicted under this section of the law?
Mr. Chairman, through you, not during my time as director, but I know that years ago there was a large establishment that was convicted and paid a large amount of money. And what we have been doing is intensifying our on-site inspections processes and working with employers. Some of them claim they didn't know about gratuities or about these schemes, but obviously we are awakening them very rapidly on that fact. But we are, as with everything, trying to work with the employers, provide the education, provide a positive reinforcement. Obviously, where that fails or where there's non-compliance, then the other option is courts, providing that the Office of the DPP will support it.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the law is fairly specific. Any employer under this section who has not submitted the correct information to you is guilty of an offense, and on summary conviction, a fine of $25,000. What is the compliance ratio? You say you have a list of the employees. How many of the employers that you have listed in your office now are compliant with this part of the law, including section 37 and 38?
Mr. Chairman, the establishments that we have in our office now, in our database, that have been assigned to officers, that is senior labor officers or labor officers, those employers are compliant because they have provided the information. Information has been entered in the database, has been analyzed, and found to be accurate. Of course, with resource limitations, we are not, I cannot say here that we go out and check and cross-check every one of these reports to verify. We have to operate somewhat of an honor system, but we do certainly have a good feel because the officers are in regular contact with the establishments in their portfolio, whether they are lying or not. And I will say, Mr. Chairman, through you, that we do have an organization right now that is probably going to be prosecuted because information has come to the attention of the office through an inspection that for a number of years the establishment was declaring that they did not collect or distribute gratuities, and we learned from a disgruntled employee and an ex-wife of the owner that that's not the case. And so when intelligence comes to us through those covert means, then of course we can take action, but it takes that some time because people are not always willing to provide information or we're not able to scrutinize them as we would like. But we're comfortable that aside from probably 2% of the portfolio of establishments that we know about that they are compliant. And officers sometimes go on their private time for lunch or dinner to some of these places just to test whether they are in fact collecting gratuities as they declare that they're not or they are. So we do some private investigation as well.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, do you have any way of comparing the number of employers who have business license or other license in the service industry with the list that you have to make sure that you include them all?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This gets towards the whole issue of the culture of compliance and how we tie in all of the different laws, whether it's pension, health insurance, labor law, gratuities. We do have the wherewithal to do that. That is through other agencies, but of course, it depends on formalizing those protocols and getting the data available and the data properly analyzed. So it does exist, it's just a matter of having access to it legitimately.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I don't get many complaints about somebody not collecting it. I get lots of complaints about how what they collect is distributed. What kind of resources you have to audit what is done to what is submitted to you in terms of one, the amount they collect, and two, the amount that they distribute, and to whom? And the law is very specific who's supposed to get and who's not supposed to get.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. Again, we do have a number of new recruiting initiatives ongoing at the moment. We have a senior labor officer, who we hope to be able to have on board within the next 6 to 8 weeks, and also a labor officer as well, which will add to our infrastructure and capacity. Unless we are able to look at the payroll records, which we do in the course of, when we go out and do an inspection, there's a whole list of questions and information that we can probe, and one of those is payroll records. And obviously, if we suspect an organization is not paying gratuities or distributing gratuities properly, we can get the payroll records and correlate that with the gratuity reports. And that's certainly a test that can be done to confirm or deny the validity of that data. Again, we're talking about resources, we're talking about data, and we do the best with what we have.
Do you believe that the best that you do is being effective in the industry with what you have?
Mr. Chairman, I have to come back to the question of context, but certainly what we have had to do to compensate for the nature or the amount of boots on the ground, what we had to do is to build relationships and work at interagency data sharing, and we have installed a confidential tip line for whistleblowers. And if someone out there is concerned that they're not receiving their gratuities or gratuities are not being distributed properly, they can always call a confidential tip line, provide a tip, which will then give the inspectors some information to augment their intelligence to go out and do inspections and probe a bit deeper. But obviously, it depends on information. So we're trying to look at all ways of serving the public with resources, i.e. direct resources as well as indirect in terms of relationships, information, and also moral persuasion.
The law provides that the employer shall present to you, produce to the director for inspection the record kept by the employer for the purpose of Section 1 of 38. And that is Section 38. I won't hold house up by reading it. It's a very comprehensive thing. Knowing that they're supposed to be compliant with 38.1, has the ministry or the department given any consideration to outsourcing this auditing as a percentage of the 25,000 fine collected?
Mr. Chairman, that's sort of a policy issue, but I know that when the big case that I referred to that was done around in the 90s with a large hotel, in that case, they outsourced a lot of the investigation and auditing work to a firm. But as I said, at the present time, we do not have evidence to suggest that there's a major problem with gratuities distribution. And obviously, if we'd had that, we'll make representation about getting the resources, which could include outsourcing. But certainly, if there is that kind of issue out there, and we had evidence of it, providing the funding through the fines would be a way of funding it. But that is a bit of a hypothetical and some policy issue, which I can't get involved in at this point.
Mr. Chair, through you, just to address the policy aspect of it, I mean, as the director has indicated, the view of the department as it stands right now seems to be that this is not an issue that would necessarily be something that they would have brought to my attention as needing to be considered. But what I can say is, with respect to all of my areas, I've asked the various departments to look at things that may be best placed to be done from an outsourcing perspective, given the fact that we do have obviously limited resources, boots on the grounds, to use the director's terms. So where it would be more efficient to do so, I would definitely be inclined to consider that should the need arise. And so with that respect, I would expect that the department will continue to monitor the situation, and if and when necessary, to have that discussion and bring that to my attention.
Has the ministry given any consideration or received any? Would the director give any consideration to having this part of the law repealed and letting the cost of labor be reflected in salaries instead of subsidized by gratuities?
Mr. Chair, through you, I also would just want to remind the member that when a similar question came before the committee dealing with gratuities, in particular the tourism industry, the Minister of Tourism indicated that dialogues were happening as we speak with the industry to determine the whole pay package, so to speak. So in the context of looking at that discussion, that's obviously something that we would be involved with as well, or in terms of making any kind of recommendation. So to be able to give a direct answer at this stage, we're not in a position to do so, but those discussions are being had.
Thank you. Mr. Bush, you had a question, sir?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in regards to pensions, what staff support is needed presently? Is it the superintendent, or I thought a while ago two positions were given. Are they for pensions?
Mr. Chairman, through you, the honourable member is correct. I mentioned two positions, the senior labour officer and labour officer, but there's also a senior pensions officer. It's an approved post from this financial year, which has been protected to the next financial year, which we are in the process now of finalising recruitment for. That's a senior pensions officer. We have also been, with the support of the ministry over the last year or so, been able, and with the deputy governor, been able to get a number of highly qualified, retired, but able and fair-priced temporary senior pensions officers to help us out with a lot of the backlog projects with pensions, and we've made tremendous progress with that. But I'm hoping that we get the senior pensions officer recruited soon, and we still, we have the superintendent or deputy director position that is presently not residing in the department directly. And obviously, if the National Pensions Office or the DLP will continue to be responsible for pensions administration as well as employer compliance, and not the transfer to SEMA, which is the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority, we'll need to obviously ensure that we have resources either contracted or on a full-time basis to deal with that, because it is a tremendous amount of money and responsibility for us to have, and we need to ensure resources. Mr. Chairman, if I could also just add that we also are recruiting an assistant director of labor and pensions post, which also provides support for labor and pensions from a sort of corporate point of view, and also a lot of the administrative support for both units.
When, Mr. Chairman, when do you expect that those posts will be filled?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Eminently, we're now shortlisted, or we're shortlisted for interviewing the senior labor officer and senior pensions officer. We hope to be able to advertise within the next couple of weeks for the assistant director, labor and pensions, and hopefully by end of July have that person on board, or persons on board. As members are aware, I am the director as well as acting pension superintendent for the time being, at least.
And do you think by then that you will know whether that company can brag out those 30 people or not? And has pensions?
Mr. Miller?
Through you to the minister, is the ministry in support of a policy that would lead to the development of, or legislation that would lead to the development of a human resource authority to include the management of labor recruitment and work permits?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the issue, obviously, of human resources and the management of labor and labor relations in the country, obviously, is something that I believe needs to be considered and needs to be looked at in more detail. Now, any move to have such an authority established would require more than just my view. It was something that we would have to have take as a government in terms of the policy decision to do so, and then obviously make whatever changes that would need to be made, legislative and otherwise, in order to affect that. So that is something that I will continue to have a conversation with my colleagues to determine whether or not that is the view of the government going forward.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, is the ministry currently reviewing pension legislation?
Mr. Chair, yes, we are.
In the process of that review, is any consideration being given to the introduction of a pension scheme with a fully funded, defined benefit social security system with a salary cap?
Mr. Chair, as I indicated, there is a pension review currently underway, but that issue has never been brought to my attention or that of the department, I understand, from the relevant stakeholders in the pension sphere. So to say that we are looking at that specific scheme at this time, the answer would be no.
Is the minister and the director satisfied that the current legislation and the myriad of schemes that are out there for pensions is not solving the problem of Cayman needing retirement in its present format?
Mr. Chair, I would just start off by saying that, obviously we are reviewing the legislation, so the fact is we don't think that what is currently in place now is sufficient from the broader legislative framework with respect to some of the more detailed aspects of what may come up. Of course, it's still in draft form, so it first has to go to the caucus and cabinet for approval regarding what is being recommended, and then to the House. But the short answer is we're reviewing the legislation because we recognize that there are some deficiencies that need to be addressed.
What is the objective and focus of the review that is taking place?
Mr. Chairman, there's a long list of objectives. It is to look at things like the increasing of the age to which persons become entitled to access their pension, establishing enhancing the supervisory infrastructure, introducing or enhancing mechanisms to improve compliance with the National Pensions Law by strengthening and broadening the enforcement powers of the Department of Labor and Pensions, looking at legislative changes arising from recommendations made by the Complaints Commissioner, and that is, one of those is that the establishment of administrative fines, so that you can put in place fines for non-compliance as opposed to going through the arduous task of the courts. Also, introduce more requirements for pension plans to educate and inform members, including having annual general meetings, membership communication, and also there's, as a member may know through the Honourable Minister, there's also a review going on right now with national pensions investment regulations as well. In terms of the robustness of pensions in these islands, Mr. Chairman and honourable members, we have now approximately $1 billion US in all the pension plans in the island, and we have a number of plans. I'll just list them very quickly. Barclays Bank Retirement Plan, BAF Cayman Pension Plan, British American Colonial, 4 Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan, Cayman Wilds International Retirement Fund, Cayman National Trust, CIBC Canadian, Fidelity Pension Plan, First Caribbean Bank Pension Plan, Jake Scott Group Plan, McCormick Pension Plan, Mighty Oaks Pension Plan, Schroeder Cayman Retirement Plan, Scotiabank and Trust Cayman Plan, Scottish Annuity, Life Holdings, Silver Thatch Pension Plan, and Wyvern Retirement Trust. Of those multi-employer and single-employer pension plans, approximately 50,000 employees are members. Now, if you look at the contribution rate of 10% per annum on a year's maximum pension earnings of $60,000, that's only $6,000 per year that somebody can put into their retirement plan or pension plan. And if you take that for 42 years, you're not talking about a lot of money when you have to face inflation and healthcare costs and everything as people get into their golden years. So, Mr. Chairman, the department through the National Pensions Board, a hard-working board, and through our consultants, we've actually got all the pension plans to conduct actuarial valuations. And those valuations look at the demographics and look at income replacement. And the reports that we got back earlier this year indicate that with the existing contribution rate and the existing year's maximum pensionable earnings of $60,000, the income replacement ratio is very, very low. So that this essentially becomes pretty much a safety net under the existing scenario. I don't believe that when the law was passed in 1998, Mr. Chairman, don't cut me off, I don't want to go back too much in history, but that it was never anticipated that it would be 10% forever. But economic factors and other factors dictate otherwise at the moment. So looking at increasing the salary band or increasing the contribution rate is something that obviously would need to be looked at, but that's a policy matter.
Would the director agree that part of the problem when we get to what a Caymanian and the people that really depressed, those making $2,500 or less per month, is the ones that really need the protection, that the fact that we have that myriad of pension plans that they can be assigned to by their employer, that what they get from each is going to be minuscule, that it's so minuscule at the end that they're not going to have any pension at all. And whether if we're talking about a safety net, whether a social security system where they contribute only to one plan. When they get 18, you get a social security number, you contribute to that plan for your working life for your safety net, would not be a better option than what we currently have. And again, wouldn't it not be easier to administer from the pension administration and regulatory point of view? That's what I put in place in 1992, make you a national team and they would throw money and throw it out.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. Through you, obviously, that is a bit speculative and is also asking me for a personal opinion, also perhaps going into policy, which I'm unable to do. However, I would just like to say that I have been fortunate as superintendent to sign a number of retirement savings arrangements, letters over the last couple of years. And I'm very pleased whenever I do so to see the amounts of money that some of our Caymanians are getting out of their pension, and that they have something that can last them for 15, 20 years. Mind you, at the present time it's only $12,000 a year, but when you put in additional voluntary contributions into your pension, people can access that lump sum once they turn 60, and some of those amounts are quite significant. So pensioners are receiving some, attractive amounts, and the more you put in, the more you get back. And if we are able to continue to protect the portfolios and monitor the investment returns and performance of these plans as effective supervisors, we should see a continued positive uptick and therefore a better outlook for retirees. So that's all I want to say about that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
One last question, Mr. Chairman. The director keeps ducking out from policy. Through you, do you not regard it as part of your responsibility as director to recommend policy changes based on what you see on the ground up through the CEO, through the CEO to the ministry?
Mr. Chairman, through you. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. McLean and then Mr. Bush and then...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in keeping with that same vein, I believe that the director spoke about there may be a need for a policy decision to widen that band from the 60,000, the contribution, or the ban on the contribution, which is from 10, maybe up 12, 15, whatever. Is it not easier, from his experience, and I'm not asking him about policy, but recommend that it also include bands of contribution to your pension? So in other words, after 60,000, it could be 5%, and the likes, where we would have more. And secondly, the other question, what effect has the withdrawal from the pensions, the 35,000 that we passed the motion in here, what effects has that had on the earning power of the pensions since we implemented that system?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, I don't have that information in terms of the impact on the person's pension fund. We know that there's under the National Pension Law Part 7A, there is a whole system of how the withdrawal scheme should work, and also it's a requirement for a 1% additional repayment by the employee into their pension, and also the property has a registered restriction, so it cannot be any dealings on the property until the money is repaid to the pension fund or the person reaches retirement. But in terms of the impact on the retirement outlook or income replacement, we haven't tracked it to that extent.
Mr. Chairman, I thought he said an actuarial study was done recently. Actuarial study was done recently. Did that not cover that?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, the actuarial valuation that were done did not actually look at that, because that does not apply to everybody in the demographic. That's only a couple of cases in each plan, so it wouldn't have been a material issue that would have featured in the actuarial valuation by the actuaries. But despite that, as I mentioned, all the reports that came in from firms such as Mercer, Eckler, Monroe Chappell, Lewis and Ellis, they all show that the income replacement ratios are very low based on the current contribution rate and the current annual pensionable earnings.
Thank you, Mr. Ebanks. Mr. Bush.
2 questions, Mr. Chairman. Can the director say how the pensions are protected now? Meaning their investment, how that is done, how it's safeguarded. We know that in some time ago, pensions in Cayman suffered a heavy loss. That was roughly $200 million, as far as I can remember, between 2005 and 2009. And I want to know that the pensions now in the present regime are not subject to that kind of risk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, through you, the investment regulations to the National Pensions Law actually spell out some very sensible safeguards in terms of supervising and managing the investments, and also it instructs the administrators and the investment advisors and custodians as to the rules of the game, including but not limited to the asset allocations for all the pension plans. In addition to that, all the plans are required to prepare reports to send to the superintendent of pensions, and also all plans are subject to annual audits. What we did about almost 2 years ago was we had a firm come in, Monroe Chappell, and they did a investment regulations compliance review of all the plans, and they produced a report, and that report showed some gaps in terms of compliance. And so one of the very hardworking and knowledgeable temporary senior pensions officers, who is on my team now, but his contract finishes on the 30th of June, unfortunately, has been working with all the plans and dealing with all those gaps in the investment regulations, compliance reviews, and setting up reporting, much more robust reporting arrangements to ensure that we keep a much closer eye on compliance. And we're also looking at the issue of expense ratios to make sure that the expenses for managing the funds are competitive and kept within proper benchmarks, and that we also are trying to establish a scheme where we are able to establish a customized and standardized system of reporting, so that we can be able to compare performance of plans from a regulatory point of view, but also employers and employees can look at a plan to see if it's a better plan compared, when you look at comparative benchmarks. So it's much more robust, Mr. Chairman, and we are hoping to grow from strength to strength in line with obviously resources and use of technology, etc.
Mr. Chairman, the director might have said, but does the department have enough staff to staff resources to inspect projects for safety and risk, like construction projects?
Thank you, Mr. Member, for that question. Mr. Chairman, through you, the department has had two major divisions or two units, the pensions investigations unit and the labor investigations unit. And early last year, or mid last year, we set up the inspections unit. I think it was September when it got fully operational. And that unit is meant to do proactive inspections of workplaces, gratuities, and also of construction sites. We have one officer in the department, Mr. Gene Hides, who is a well-qualified and experienced and super certified occupational health and safety specialist. And he is actually the one that carries out the majority of the construction sites inspections under the construction regulations. And we also, as part of our strategy as well, is training of supervisors and site foremen that's required under the construction safety regulations, and also public relations in terms of information and awareness. We're also working with developers and large contractors to help them to tie or have their subcontractors commit to the same kind of safety requirements that they are required to abide by, so that all stakeholders, whether it's the main contractor, general contractor, or subcontractors, have in their contracts the safety covenants, and also their people are trained. Again, because of budgetary constraints, we have to use other measures of trying to ensure compliance and look at interagency cooperation and technology interfacing. And certainly if we can get more people, that'll be great. Whenever the country is able to afford it, we certainly could use it, especially with the uptick in development and construction that is on the horizon at the moment. We're trying to also work on outsourcing of some training, and the minister and the ministry is also looking also at licensing of folks to work in various jobs in the industrial or commercial field, which will also drive the requirement for training. But that's sort of the overview of our infrastructure at the moment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, we'll proceed to vote on this appropriation. All those in favor of EGA 3, employment regulatory activities for $1,083,345 standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. Turning now to consider appropriation CCO 1, teaching of tertiary level professional and vocational programs, $4,073,205. Found on page 205 of the annual plan and estimates.
205.
Mr. Chair, at this point, I'd also like to thank.
Sorry, 204, my apologies.
I'd like to thank the Director of the Department of Labor and Pensions for assisting in dealing with that particular vote.
Thank you. CCO 1 on page 204.
Mr. Chairman,
Sir?
some questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions on CCO1? Mr. Bush?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I suppose that this is the area that we deal with programs in the community, the University College, and I am about to ask a question in regards to the hospitality training school and where we're at with it, and what kind of funding is included in this $4 million. We're dealing with CCO1, right?
Yes, sir. we
Okay.
are.
That's the question. Before we announced the program, the council that was appointed came to a conclusion which I had agreed on in the latter stages, and was hoping to see it move forward. And in fact, Mr. Chairman, in your budget and in the budget from 2012, we increased liquor and alcohol beverages. Specifically, at that time, and you've gotten Hansard, you will find that I said it was to be used for the program, the hospitality or tourism training school, whatever they're going to call it. I suppose they'll call it something different than I called it, but it's the same thing. And that funding, however much we raised in the increase in the fees there, that was supposed to go to hospitality training school. Meaning that I expected, the view that I had was stipend to encourage children, certain amount, encourage children in there, students in there, young adults I'm talking about also, and of course for the funding of the university college aspect of it, because that's where the academic aspect of the program was supposed to take place.
Thank you. Ms. Rivers?
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you, I will ask the president of University College to answer in just a moment, but just to say that the ministry and staff of the ministry also sits on the steering committee for the development of the hospitality training school, but the president will be able to give us more specifics as to where we're at in that process.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Roy Biden, and I'm the president of the University College. I also sit as chair of the Hospitality Advisory Council for the development of the School of Hospitality Studies, which is what it's called. Mr. Chair, to answer the member's question, the school is preparing to open in September. We recently held interviews, and a director has been selected. So all arrangements are in place for the opening of the school in September. I might add that the University College is administering the school under a contract for the Ministry of Tourism. So the University College is responsible for the academic standards, for ensuring that the curriculum is carried out properly, and for all of the administration and the administrative arrangements.
Mr. Chairman, before I move on, I want to thank the president for the way he has managed the school in the last 4 years. I've paid attention to the growth and the development of the University College, and we thank God that it has been what we always expected when we develop it. But in the last 4 years, I want to thank particularly the president for his very professional way he has dealt with the school, the bipartisan way which he's kept things at that level, non-political. And so I am pleased with the work that the president have done over the past 4 years. Having said that, Mr. Chairman, can the president say how much has been included for the starting of the school? What work has been done thus far in the budget? How much funds?
Mr. Chair, the actual funding, I don't know too much about, because the way the arrangement is structured, the Universal College is only being paid for the administrative services we render. I do know that there was a budget coming from the Ministry of Tourism. Well, we submitted our costs, and recently I took that submission with the Ministry of Tourism's proposal to the Board of Governors of the Universal College, which approved it. So as to the exact amount, the Ministry of Tourism is in a much better position to say how much they have budgeted for this particular development.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, can the minister say whether she knows anything about how much her, the chief officer, or the deputy is the doctor? Is that she's deputy, right? Yeah. Either one of the three. Can either one of the three say what the funding is for the school now that's in play, that we know the program hopefully will start this year?
Mr. Chair, through you, as the president indicated, this is a purchase agreement with the Ministry of Tourism, so the funding for this specific program is being provided through the auspices of the Ministry of Tourism, and I don't have those numbers to hand. What we from the Ministry of Education's funding perspective is generally the professional and vocational programs, including the education program that's offered through the school, and just the general operational.
I understand that from what the president said, but as a minister, again, and with joined up government, and your budgeting and going forward, they didn't tell you how much they have for you?
I'm sure I can get that information. I just don't have that information right now, is what I'm saying. But I would.
But you wasn't
look to
told,
get
so
that
you were not aware of the
information.
amount then? You're not, sorry, Mr. Chairman, the minister is not aware of what her budget is for that program.
Well, it's not my budget. It's a budget that's coming from the Ministry of Tourism, so I don't have the specific details to hand on this particular program.
But that's what I'm
But
saying.
that's what I'm saying.
What I'm questioning is why the minister hasn't been told, because while you're not the tourism minister, you're certainly carrying a component which you are responsible for, which demands that you be paid. You have funding for that academic parts of it. Maybe somebody else will be able to help there.
Mr. Borden.
Government is not joined up then as we
Mr.
thought.
I can tell you what we submitted from the Universal College amounts to $398,318
Thank you, Mr. Borden.
for the first year of operation. Now, whether that has been approved is not, it's not for us to say, but that's the submission we gave. And in that is, of course, included our administration fee, because the arrangement is that the Universal College takes care of all the expenses, and then we submit an invoice at the end of, or at regular intervals.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can anybody say chief officer or the deputy, whether they know that you have this budget or not?
Mr. Chair, through you, I recall, and I'm sure the member will recall, that during the Finance Committee discussion on the Ministry of Tourism, the indications were given that this is something that the ministry was going to continue to support, and they actually spoke along the lines of what the President said of putting these mechanisms in place. So I would expect that the budget, with respect to making sure that this program does come online, has been allocated and has been voted for when we voted the Ministry of Tourism's budget. And as the President said, this is a contractual agreement with tourism, even though we are acting as on the steering committee to help to develop the program from the academic perspective. The purchaser of the product is the Ministry of Tourism, and we voted and approved those budgets.
Mr.
So I would
Chairman.
expect that had been included in that budget that we voted on.
Yeah, I certainly thought it. I don't recall anything discussions about the tourism school, as I call it still. I don't record any discussion on that in Finance Committee, but we were dealing with so many different things that it could have been said, but I just certainly don't recall it. But why I'm asking here is because when we developed the program, the school, the university college, is a huge, in fact, one of the major aspects of it is that's where they get the academic parts of the course of the program is at the university college. So that's a major part. It's a major partner, and I certainly would have thought that that as the Minister of Tourism, the least that you would know is that your budget has been secured for what you have in your budget to do, because you have work to do, but now you're saying you don't know whether you have the funding or not.
No, Mr. Chair, that's not what was said.
That's an incorrect representation of what was said, sir.
Well, tell me what was said. That's what I'm trying to find out.
She has said that it is a contractual arrangement between the community college and the Department of Tourism, and the funds would have been voted to the Minister for Tourism. The Ministry of Education is only involved from the academic side of the program itself, so therefore the funds would not have been voted to her. So it is not correct to say that she does not know what her budget is. She knows what her budget. That's the purpose which we are now looking at her appropriations.
Oh, well, I'm trying to find out exactly then what her budget is.
But Mr. Bush, in all due respect, I think the point has been made. We are now looking at her budget, and they have told you that the budget, the figure from the community college perspective is $398,000 and $398,000, couple $100. So I think the figure has been established. As to whether or not it is included in the Ministry of Tourism's budget, we can determine that sometime this afternoon, but we shouldn't continue anymore on that line, because it's holding up other people who want to ask questions.
My God.
That question has been answered, Mr. Bush.
Mr. Chairman, please, I have a right, and I'm to the point.
You have a right.
You have a right to question them, because you are expecting me to vote on this, and now you don't know what the figure is in this aspect of the budget. That's what I'm saying.
I did not say we would vote. I said you continuing that line of questioning is holding up others who want to ask questions.
Yeah, and I don't suppose that ever happened in this committee, eh?
I'm not saying it doesn't happen, sir, but we have established that the money, if it is voted, would have been voted to the Ministry of Tourism.
All I want to know is, when I'm casting my vote, Mr. Chairman, I think as chairman, that's what you need to ascertain as well. If I am casting my vote for this appropriations, and this appropriation contains certain work that the minister is expected to do, then I want to know that she has the proper funding for it. And that's all I'm questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Mr. Miller, you were trying to ask a question.
I suspect it's not there. Not enough.
Through you, Mr.
Mr.
Chairman,
Miller.
can the ministry explain to me why this program is being funded this way, and why the funds isn't provided directly to the community college as part of this vote?
Joined up government, they call it. Yeah, I reckon it's joined up.
Mr. Chair, through you, as I indicated, this was, and several members in here may be able to elaborate on this as well, but this was an initiative that was of the Ministry of Tourism initially, And so they just maintained that relationship with UCCI and entered into that arrangement directly with UCCI, and the involvement of the Ministry of Education on the steering advisory council is that in that we participate at the technical advisory level, but the actual funding and the contractual arrangement was as it was initially conceived to be with the Ministry of Tourism, given that it's a tourism-related initiative.
Mr. Chairman, my grandmother always told me, he who pays the piper calls the song, and calls the tune. And my concern is that I don't understand, I can understand the Ministry of Tourism initiating the program to get the program put in at the community college. But once the community college and the education department agrees that the program is necessary and that they're going to provide it and it is costed, I can't understand why the money has to go into the tourism department, ministry, and the community college has to spend the money and then claim it on an invoice. Why can't the money be put in this vote to the community college and be administered properly? Because then they have control of how to implement the program.
Mr. Chair, through you, I think that, and it's been pointed out to me, that with respect to the University College of the Cayman Islands, it's not unusual for them to contract with other government agencies. There apparently exists a contract with the portfolio of civil service to offer services for Civil Service College. They also contract with other private sector agencies as well. And so to the member's question about why isn't everything centrally done through this one vote, well, each of these agencies have their own kind of mandate that they're looking to deliver and have contracted UCCI in order to assist in the delivery of that mandate. So that's just to add some more perspective of the fact that it doesn't necessarily require that everything goes through the Ministry of Education, given that there are these other opportunities for UCCI to have these direct relationships.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. McLean?
I don't know if I can help in this regard, but DAT6, which is under the Minister, the Deputy Premier, is public education programs, 104, and it talks about providing on-the-job training combined with classroom instruction and competency certification to raise the occupational competences of both young and people preparing for career in tourism and for incumbent tourism industrial personnel who want to advance their careers in tourism. Now, I don't know if that's where the funds for that is, but the boss is here.
Mr.
Mr. Chairman, I understand the question was the funding for the tourism school. The concern is they want to make sure that that's allocated in this budget. So yes, it is. It's in my ministry, and it was $350,000. It's under the apprentice program, the scholarship, and then from DOT itself. So it'll be pieced together at 350, but it's protected.
The scholarships.
Yes, sir.
But we're not talking about the education, the tourism scholarships.
No, no.
We're talking about, Mr. Chairman, through you, we're talking about the hospitality, what are you calling it now? School of Hospitality Services.
Correct.
What the funding is for the community college aspect of it. That's what I was trying to ascertain. And whether that's included, and I thought it was included in their budget. It's not there.
No, sir.
But now in the vote that you gave me, you're saying that vote
It protected it.
has it in it?
Yes, sir.
Well, do you know that last year your budget was $906,376? $906,376. That's what you used last year in that budget, in that vote.
For what? For scholarships?
No. In your total vote on that appropriation. I see the figures here.
Mm-hmm.
What concerns me is that last year that vote was $906,376. This year, inclusive of the school, which you didn't have last year, and you've got to pay that $350,000. The vote this year, which you're budgeting, is $1,094,926. So if you're going to take $350,000 from your vote you spent last year, what then is you cutting down and spare? But we're not going to more opportunity now to deal with your budget. So I'm trying to find out what is it under the community college. I hope that's clear enough and it's not muddling the waters, but I have to look at...
I believe that, through you, Mr. Chairman, I believe your concern is you want to make sure that money is available. And when the money was voted in my ministry, it was allotted for and it's available. What I'll do is ask to have a breakdown so you can be satisfied that it's there.
And my concern, understand what my concern is, what your vote was last year, knowing the constraints you all had and what you keep pointing out, and now you got an increase, but it's only $100,000-something, and you have just said it's 350.
Correct.
The vote what they asked for was 398.
Right.
Nevertheless, you got 350. But I want to see how.
I'll get that for you.
How that?
I'll get that for you.
And I also pointed out that the fund, just in case nobody in central government is saying anything about it, there was an undertaking given in this parliament, legislature, that the funding, the increase on liquor, alcoholic beverages, and cigarettes would fund that program. That's why we increased those things.
Okay.
That was stated by me then as finance minister. It was stated to the industry. That's why we were doing it. And that between education and tourism would get those funding to make sure that that school is up and running the way that we want it, and it can get the students in it. That's my concern.
And from the Ministry of Tourism and from the Ministry of Education and from the private sector contribution, we all have the same commitment to get this school up and running.
Yes.
Okay?
But it's not gelling together in your budget, but let's see.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkconnell. Mr. Miller, you were trying to ask a question?
I just wanted to ask the Minister of Tourism, is there any particular reason why the funding is allocated to your ministry and not to the community college vote in here now? Mr. Chairman, I'm not concerned about the amount. I want to understand the policy behind why something, a course that the community college is doing, why the vote is placed in the department, in the Ministry of Tourism, and not directly under the community college in this vote. That's all. It doesn't change anything in the final numbers in the budget. I just think that it's more appropriate for it to be here than in the Ministry of Tourism.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, I'm sure we can review that, or it'll be reviewed this year. The starting point of this program itself was started under the Leader of the Opposition. What we wanted to be successful with was, again, a partnership with education, a partnership with tourism, and private sector involvement. So the starting point was tourism having the funding for it. It started before this budget, the director being hired to put the program in place, being a big portion of it being driven by the Cayman Island Tourism Association, and the commitment as they became part of the program itself that they would be taken into private sector to experience it. So the vesting of the funds through tourism was to get the program started. As the program grows, it'll be revisited.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, we'll proceed to vote.
Mr. Chairman.
Sir?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to make a submission that might clear up any understanding that members may have. This is not a new and unique arrangement. The University College has a contract with the portfolio of the civil service to provide certain training. Previously, we contracted with the Ministry of Tourism. The program then was called the Tourism Apprenticeship Training Program. We also do these programs with private sector organizations who come to the University College to contract training and refresher courses for their employees. This is good for the University College because I'm not telling you University College business no more than is necessary, but it allows us to earn some money off the administration fee, because what we do is we submit a comprehensive package in which we build in an administration fee. So it increases the University College's earning capacity as a business venture. And we have a special section of the University College called the Professional Development Center, where we do much of this work. And that was really the cash cow of the University College.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Bush.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Borden, having personally knowing a lot of the young people who are going through the University College, let me also say my congratulations.
Mr. Bush, thank you, sir.
Yeah, to the first-class job you're doing. But I'm looking here on CCO on page 2041, and just listening to that part, just on that section where you requested 398 and you're getting 350, do you think the budget that's allocated will be able to get the things that you want done in this financial year coming?
Mr. Chair, I have reason to be confident that the Ministry of that the funds will be forthcoming. I don't think that the shortfall is that significant that it will detrimentally affect the program, quite frankly. I believe how we have this structured, and it was structured some years ago, this is a unique opportunity. It's a unique organization because it's a partnership between the Ministry of Tourism, the stakeholders, and the University College. So I have every confidence that yes, it will work, even with the obvious shortfall.
Thank you. And just for the
Thank you,
record,
Mr. Borden.
just for the record, I can't think of any minister or agency that got exactly what they requested. Everyone had to take some reduction in order for us to ensure that we met the budgetary limits. So someone taking a reduction in what they thought a program would cost and what we were able to fund is nothing new, and that shouldn't be seen as being unique to the community college or this particular budget as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And what is unique is the $906,000 last year, 2012, 933, and then this year is 1,098. You say you got 350. I won't find out how we can have it, but I'm hoping that the minister have it, and if he needs a second vote, I'm there to support it.
Thank you. So all those in favor of CCO1, teaching of tertiary level professional and vocational programs, $4,073,205, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Aye. And those against, no. Thank you, Mr. Borden.
Yes, and I would also like to echo your thanks, Mr. Chairman, to the President of UCCI for assisting with this particular vote.
Turning now to appropriation EGA 1, policy advice, governance, and ministerial support services of $4,963,482, found on page 190 of the annual plan and estimates.
Mr. Chairman.
Are there any questions? Mr. Bush?
Mr. Chairman, think this deals with policy. When someone writes in a letter to the ministry, how is that letter treated? If it is to go to the minister, how is that treated?
Yes, sir.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if there is a letter or any correspondence addressed to the minister, it is received by her personal assistant and then submitted to her for her consideration and her decision as how best to respond to the matter covered.
Mr. Chair, just to add to that, if the matter obviously is a matter that has to do with any kind of administrative or staffing or any of these type of issues, oftentimes people are a bit confused as to what should or shouldn't come to my attention with respect to action. Then I would in turn deliver the letter to either the appropriate person, in this case being the chief officer, or if it's dealing with a specific subject matter, if it's a complaint of some sort from a labor perspective, then that would be in turn sent to Department of Labor. So these are the kinds of activities that would take place depending on the nature of the letter.
So, Mr. Chairman, in the whole process, the mail comes in, there's an officer that deals with it, the minister gets her mail, and that mail then is distributed as necessary. If it has to go to someone else, some other ministry, if it's particularly not within that your ministry, then you send it on to where it's supposed to go.
Generally speaking, that is the process of.
You would indicate that has to go to somebody else, not you.
Yes. Yes, if that's, yeah. I mean, if it comes to my attention and it's not something for me to deal with directly, then it would be either. I mean, that process could possibly take place prior to getting to me if the subject matter is deemed to be such that unless it says, personal and confidential, then it doesn't come to me directly. In all cases, it could go to the relevant person in charge of that area if it's one of those matters that need to be dealt with.
And if it has to go to another ministry, you would naturally send that on.
That would be the case, yes.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, further question on another matter. I don't know if anybody have anything on that matter, but can the minister say what sort of summer programs that the department is supporting within the government for summer employment of students?
Through you, Mr. Chair, can I ask the member to maybe clarify the question a bit as to make sure that we give the response?
Students come home every year at summer, and so they're looking employment. They come to government, and government over the years, for many years now, have funded, put aside funds to specifically employ students in various departments, not just your department.
Right, so you're talking employment within government.
All over the civil service.
Understood. I will ask the chief officer to deal with that matter in more detail.
Thank you. Can I just ask everyone to please refrain from stepping into the well when you are walking in and out? Just ask your colleagues to excuse you along the back there. Thank you.
Well, look at the cause. What happened with the Queen's Bottom? They have an article on you. Talking about well. Huh?
Through the chairman.
I learned it from you.
Through the chairman, the portfolio of civil service
investigated?
developed a policy that was distributed to all the ministries regarding summer employment through internship opportunities, through ministries and the various government agencies and departments. So in line with that policy as disseminated by them, the various government ministries, agencies, departments, as they are able to accommodate, are making use of the opportunities to provide internship opportunities for students through the National Workforce Development Agency, through the National Internship Program. The NWDA is supporting various ministries and government agencies as they request support in matching them with both local and overseas students who are studying, who are interested in availing themselves of internship opportunities.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, we'll proceed. Oh, sorry, Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, is the ministry giving any consideration to policy or legislation to devolve some of the administrative authority from the Department of Education to the communities of the school?
Mr. Chair, through you, the ministry is currently looking at a legislative review, and looking at a part of that legislative review is looking at the whole governance model of education in general. And so it's a bit premature as to say what the outcome of the review will be, but we are looking at bringing the new legislative framework to the House for debate within a very aggressive timeline. But one of the things that we are looking at is looking at the governance, as I said, of education in the country, and how we can better improve the system for all involved, and in particular for the children of the country.
And the governance model that you're looking at includes, for instance, let's just take the 8 Oil Primary School in Northside, the possibility that the community could take it over as a charter school and elect a board of directors and receive a grant for the education department, but we manage the school.
Mr. Chair, through you, the whole idea of having that kind of a model is something that we are considering. We're looking at what the ramifications, what the requirements are, how to basically involve the community at large in a more meaningful way. Of course, obviously, we start by getting and encouraging PTAs to get actively involved. That's the first step, and I know certain schools are very good at that, and for those schools that may not necessarily be, we would encourage them to become more actively involved in the kind of participating in the school life. So a part of that whole review is to look at how we can actually capture the community involvement for each of the schools in, as I said, a more meaningful way from a governance, but also from a financial perspective as well.
Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, Mr. Bush. I think Mr.
Through you,
had a
Mr.
follow-up.
Chairman, I think the problem with most of the PTAs now are they're simply cash cows for whichever school they are associated with. They have no input into policy. They have no input into the budget process for the school. They have no input into what they believe the school should be, how the school should be resourced, what resource the school have. All they get is requests from the principals and the other teachers to fund things for the children that haven't been funded for education from the education ministry.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, as I said, I think, finding ways to get more community involvement at the decision-making level with respect to the needs of a particular school is something that we are actually looking at in earnest, and we're hoping to be able to put together and put forth a model that is appropriate for the Cayman Islands and our school situation.
Thank you. Mr. Bush.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Some time ago, there was a review of behavior for learning inclusion in government schools. That was done by a very wide body, inclusive of, I think, overseas assistants from the UK. I think it was the UK, but I do recall that it took place. Can the minister say what happened to that review in connection with various, I thought it was, when the request, and when we was advised about it, I thought it was a good review. Certainly the things that needed to be looked at, behavior, where students had problems, where teachers had problems, and the whole, the whole school system. And it was supposed to have taken, what, couple of weeks, I suspect. I don't know how long it took. Can the minister say what happened with the report, where she is with the recommendations of that report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe, and the member can correct me if I am wrong, but the review that you are referring to would have taken place during the last administration, and the review was, to my knowledge, never made public, but I understand that certain actions have been taken by the minister and department with respect to the findings of the review. What I did upon taking office as minister responsible for education was to call for basically an update as to where are we now with respect to these same considerations, which, as you alluded to, there was a review done prior to the new administration coming in, and so that review that the member is referring to actually was the starting point for the review that took place from November of last year to the beginning of this year. And so they basically, what was looked at was to see where and what had been put in place to address the concerns highlighted in that original review, and then to see where the gaps still existed, and if there were areas that weren't addressed, how and what are the plan of action and why weren't they addressed, and how do we actually deal with that. And so this latest review that was conducted by and this was an internal review, building on what was done previously by the senior policy officer, is what is forming the basis for the allocations in the budget dealing with some of the behavior, restructuring of the behavior management model in the system currently.
Mr. Chairman, the report that I am talking about, made known to us earlier in 2012, should have begun late in the year, late in 2012, and I don't know about any publication thereafter, but it would have been late. When I say late, probably late, early December, mid-December, or November, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I'm informed that the report that you're referring to was November 2012, and so as I said, that report formed the kind of basis of the starting point of the most recent review to look at where is the system, what has been done to address those concerns highlighted in that 2012 report, and where are the issues or the gaps that still exist that we need to focus on in terms of strengthening the whole behavior and inclusion model.
But that internal review, none of those reports, well, the original report and the subsequent pre-say of it, if I should say, put it that way, of that report, none of those have been made public. None of the findings have been made public, but you're saying that you use some of those things to be able to get to where you are in the budget.
Well, we have been, ever since that latest review has been conducted, I've been speaking publicly on the issues and the findings of that report. And what has always been the intention is to make that report, the 2014 review, public, which includes as an appendix the 2012 report. So that information will also be made public. The reason it hasn't been made public to date, the 2014 is because it has budget implications, which I'm hoping that the House will approve, and once approved, then that information will be made readily available to all.
Thank you. Mr. Bush.
Mr. Chairman, this is the third time today that we've heard that there's reports in the ministry, in this particular ministry, that's not been made public. If it's not being made public, could these various reports that keep collecting copy be at least given to us as members of this House so we can make look into it and so forth and see what that we can question or make suggestions or whatever, because it seems to be a ongoing threat of these reports not getting to us or to the public. Through you, Madam Minister, could you see that these various reports start to reach the members, please?
Mr. Chair, through you, as you have pointed out, the two reports that I recall at this stage, maybe I'm missing the third, the one on Sunrise Center, which was done, again, not during my administration as ministry, but under the previous administration, and then this latest report that the member spoke about, the 2012 report, again, under the previous administration. I have no qualms about making that report. In addition, the 2014 report, which was always intended to be made public once we approve the recommended budget implications in that review. So I will commit to making those reports public. And as I've said, going forward with respect to the approach to education, the hope is to do additional, reviews of the system. And again, that would be publicly and readily accessible.
Mr. Chairman, I don't run from responsibility, but I do recall that it was late in the year when that was undertaken, and why it didn't reach, why we only knowing about some of the findings now. I can't figure that one out, but certainly that's not the remit of any last administration. Last administration would have been beginning in December until the elections, if you want to call it about the last administration. But my concern is that if this is part of the budget, where we would have known better how to accept any such report if that was made public to us, rather than that original report being taken, redactions done, and something else made out of it.
Thank you, Mr. Bush.
Yes, Mr. Chair, with respect to any redactions of the original report, I would not be able to speak to that because that original report predated me. So if there's any questions about the specifics of the quote-unquote original report, unfortunately, I would not be in a position to speak to that. I can only speak to that to the report that was given to me as the 2012 report, being the report of the behavior inclusion that you referred to.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. McLean.
Mr. Chairman, am I hearing the minister say she doesn't know anything about our report either?
No, Mr. Chair, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying is that when I took office and was presented with the report, this was the report that I was presented with as being the 2012 report. Now, I don't know if the member is making any insinuations or any indications that there might have been a report pre the report. All I'm saying is I am not aware of any such reports besides what was given to me as the 2012 report.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, since it was my statement that kind of got this, I want to say, sir, it was not in my intention for anything to be thrown at the feet of the minister, but what is consistent is the chief officer and the staff going that they've been here through every party or every group. So that's where I'm thinking where these things are not being published.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Mr. McLean, you were trying to ask another question.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I hear the minister say that in the last few months she has been talking about many of the things that was in that report and how they're addressing them. I want to talk about the 2012 review, where and I'm sure we have all been in here long enough to know. Be careful how we answer. We all been here long enough. Wherein this report talks about I have heard the minister, she made a statement in Cayman Brack as well, about the behavior of children. I spoke about, the leader of the opposition spoke about the behavior of teachers, but nobody has addressed that. In the meantime, this report sits gathering dust with serious observations about how our children are being treated. Serious, and don't ask me reading on it. What is being done about that?
Mr. Chair, through you, just so I can make sure I understand the question, is the member's question what is being done to address the concerns raised in the 2012 report, or just address the questions being raised with respect to behavior of both, not just students, but teachers as well?
Mr. Chairman, we all accuse our children of their bad behavior, and I'm not saying that some of our children don't need some intervention. But Mr. Chairman, there is a problem. And a lot of the problem starts with adults, which was highlighted in this report. So I'm just concerned because it says that there has been, in essence, what it's saying is that the structures have not been put in place on how adults, teachers, should be treating our children. That's what it says to me. Now I want to know how we're addressing those concerns.
Mr. Chair, through you, I will ask the Senior Policy Officer for Behavior and Inclusion, who actually conducted the 2014 review, to speak to the findings of the review and also then what is actually being planned to address the gaps in the system, which, as I said, I have spoken about publicly on the floor of the House as well as in Cayman Brack and on TV and whatnot.
Good afternoon, Chair, Honourable Members. My name is Anita Cornish. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor and Manager for Inclusion.
Ms. Cornish, can you speak louder, please? We can hardly hear you.
Okay, I will. With regards to your question, thank you, Honourable Member. We're obviously greatly concerned about to ensure that children have the best opportunities and that we do put structures and systems in place. I was fairly new into post not long after the Minister, and obviously undertook, as anyone would, new to post, what might be the key critical issues and areas on taking up my post. I had an opportunity to review some previous work as my starting point, and actually progress had been implemented in terms of the structures for children, particularly around data management, recording more effectively. There are still some remaining priorities in terms of the recent review and some of the consultations and surveys that we've undertaken with the community and the discussions that the Minister has had. And it's evident that there are some clear structures and policies in place for children, but it's how we operationalise those policies, follow through some of the systems that we have in school. So the majority of our focus and work has really been, particularly this term, is looking at how we support and develop our teachers and our schools to actually empower them to follow through sanctions, rewards, systems and processes so that children are clear about what the expectations are of their behaviour. We set high expectations and we model those expectations. You may have been aware that we've undertaken quite a lot of work this past 3 or 4 weeks, where we have consulted, we've reviewed some key policies, and then we've established some key expectations ready for the new school year. We will also be working with high schools, particularly with some training and support, where key senior managers in schools are going to be taking forward and leading the development of their staff within their schools to follow through some of the policies, expectations, the rewards and the processes in order to ensure that we have safe places for children.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
Sorry.
Mr. Chairman,
I think
I couldn't understand too much of it, but Mr. Chairman, I am particularly concerned with statements such as poor behavior, and teachers are negative towards students. I am particularly concerned about those kind of statements. Do not give the impression they care, and speak in an aggressive manner, tone to speaker, and are students, and are dismissive of our students. These are the kinds of statement of fact that runs counter to what we want and what we need really at this time. The minister is very committed, I believe, about our students and ensuring, and when the premier was minister, he was extremely concerned himself about the behavior of our students and putting some responsibility on our parents also. But when we get, well, I don't know the man, but Dr. David Moore, does anybody know him? He must have some authority on education and reviews, and these are the kind of statements he and many others who were reviewers are making. That is where my head starts like an accordion. That concerns start to surface, and I don't want it to appear like this is something that's the whole education system, because it is very specific that there are some. Now we'll pick out our children and dismiss them and put them into to these behavioral classrooms, whilst leaving these teachers, I was going to use a description, but leaving these teachers who should not be in the system. And some other questions are going to come, where we recruit our teachers from, and which system we are using and who we are using.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, through you, I just want to reiterate the member's passion with respect to putting responsibility on all parties that are at the table with respect to how our students are being spoken to and treated in the classroom and otherwise. As members in this House will probably know by now, I will call a spade, and when it comes to talking about inappropriate behavior of our children, then that's unacceptable. But equally, when I spoke about that during the contribution to the debate, talking about teachers and other staff and administration that may themselves not be doing what we as a government have contracted to them to do, which is to treat our children with respect and to give the best level of service that they possibly can give, then of course, the press picks up on that, and how dare we actually question the experiences of our children in this way. But I think the member is absolutely correct. There are things in the system that we need to ensure that we don't see continuing perpetuated, and I've asked for those persons responsible with respect to any kind of performance management or any of these issues to make sure that they keep a vigilant and to act accordingly when instances such as this may come to light. And we are looking at developing policies such as a complaints policy to address some of these concerns with respect to how people are treated. But equally, we will be looking at, and I will ask the chief officer to speak to more details as it relates to issues of discipline, but I recognize that we may be blurring the lines on some of our votes, and I would ask that questions specifically dealing with education and education-related servicing and staffing would wait until we get to the education-related votes, just as a general request.
Mr. Chairman, I thought, I hear the minister asking to be specific, but I thought this was about policy. I really thought, yeah, because, I mean, and Mr. Chairman, I do apologize, but in many regards, ministers does not hold responsibility for the administration and implementation of certain aspects of all aspects of their ministries. But certainly, it needs to be taken up on the policy, because, you know, when it is damaging to our children when we read things like teachers lack of understanding of student-specific learning needs is a weakness. That is these are serious statements, and this thing has been kicking around since 2012. And we talk about our students, but I don't hear anything talk about the weaknesses within the system.
Sure, absolutely, Mr. Chair, and maybe I didn't make myself clear. The thrust of being able to address those concerns is through the development of a new complaints policy, which the ministry, and this is a national policy, which the ministry has developed, and it is something that is in direct response to the concerns that myself as minister have heard, councillor has heard, number of people have heard various complaints, but there didn't seem to be kind of a central repository as to how these things are being addressed. And so the complaints policy was developed with specifically that in mind, to be able to ensure that if there were concerns that the member is raising regarding the performance of either individual persons in the system or collective persons in the system, that there is a means and a mechanism for those complaints to be actually addressed.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bush.
Mr. Chairman, in the budget process last year, I asked, and I did the same thing in the BRAC. If there is any intention on recruiting teachers to scrutinize where they come from, how they fit in, their culture, how they could relate to our society, and that sort of thing, et cetera, et cetera. And while I know that the ministry is not responsible for hiring, you are responsible for educational policy. And that is a concern I've had for many years. How are we recruiting? Where are we recruiting from? How do we get a recruitment format, policy, whatever, that is going to be able to pay some attention to whom we are employing?
Mr. Chair, through you, as the member rightly pointed out, the minister obviously is not involved with the recruitment aspect of the ministry and in any of the areas, but from a policy perspective, obviously the thrust that we want is we want the best possible teachers in our system for our students for the longest possible time. Now, I've been advised that there is, as a part of the recruitment process, there is some questions that deal with issues of fit and just cultural sensitization, etc. I'm also, as part of the induction program, I'm also told that new recruits go through a cultural sensitization, so to speak, in terms of their training to get them acclimatized to life in the Cayman Islands and what it means to be in our system. And so from that perspective, I'm made to understand that attempts are made to help new recruits into the system to become aware of what is expected and aware of what it means to teach here locally in the Cayman Islands. And obviously that is with respect to people that are recruited from overseas or from outside the jurisdiction.
Mr. Chairman, in the reports, be aware that I'm aware of both reports, but I only recently know of both reports because by the time I left office, I doubt that that report the first and original report had been published. But I have a know of both the original and the revised reports. Well, I don't know about any 2014. I know about a 2012 that has been what I see as revised. Know it as revised.
Mr. Chair, if there's any questions on the original 2012 report, I would have to defer to my chief officer to answer. As I said, I'm only aware of one report that was given to me.
On that original report, Dr. David Moore, CBE, was the lead reviewer. A favorite, I don't know how to pronounce that. Sounds Spanish to me, and I don't know Spanish, but his last name is Blanchard. That's quite English. And a Barbara Pierce, E. Banks, Kiva Powell, Wilbur Lee, Range, Centonia, Cacho, Carol Bennett, Gloria Bell, Vicar Frederick Amador, Lynn Monteith, Kimberly Watler, Litrico, Joe Wallace, Elroy Bryan, Lydia Warren, Alfred Gordon, Pedro Lazari were the people who did that original review. And I don't know who did the next one, but that seems to be a very learned review. And I want to find out how were you able to relate your recommendations from what they made to what you are working on.
So as I said, the 2012, no, I don't know if it's the original or the revised 2012, but the 2012 report that was presented as the report that was conducted, the member is making a statement about an original and a revised, and I can't comment on that.
You never seen none?
I've seen the report that was given to me as the 2012 report. So the fact is, that's exactly what I'm speaking on. The 2012 report that is attached. That was used as the basis of the starting point to look at the system, and then the latest review looked at what had been done to address those concerns highlighted in the report and where there were gaps to then talk about what still needs to be done and the plan of action that we're beginning to roll out and hopefully put in full force in 2014. So I'll ask the chief officer to just take us through what the review, the 2014 review, has unearthed with respect to what had been done to implement the findings of the 2012 report.
Ms. Rodriguez.
Thank you, sir. And through you, Mr. Chair, As contained in the 2012 report, there were a number of recommendations, and in the review that was the 2014 report lists those and talks about progress in relation to those. Just to give you a sample of the recommendations made and some comments. The first recommendation made in the 2012 was that there was a need to establish systems to regularly monitor the effectiveness and implementation of ministry policies relating to behavior and inclusion. And that was one of the questions that was posed in the 2012 report. We were aware there were a lot of policies done, a lot of strategies being implemented, and the question was, are they having a positive impact? And the feedback here was that while these policies were in place, there was work to be done to make sure we're monitoring the effectiveness of how they're being implemented and therefore the impact. In terms of the review conducted by the senior policy advisor, in terms of what her findings were, she talked about, or as is included in her report, that there were issues about consistency across schools in relation to issues such as reporting exclusions, and that this area remained a priority. So further actions had been taken to establish roles and responsibilities, but a big part of her conclusion is that we need to do more to make sure that the considerable resources that we have in our systems are being used effectively, but also the policies that are part of our system are actually being implemented as intended. And one of her conclusions from her own separate review was that that is a big area that we need to focus on in the ministry, is how are we using our resources, how are we organizing what we're doing, how are we ensuring consistency in practice in our schools.
Can I ask the Chief Officer, Mr. Chairman, who did the revise?
I think, if you're not, in terms of, you asked about review of the progress against recommendations, I am most eager and willing to speak to the report itself, if that's what you would prefer me to respond to.
I'm trying to ascertain, because here we have the original with 8 pages of recommendations,
right,
and then the revised that I've seen, which the minister's calling 2012 revised too. But it's the revised document. Whenever that was done, I don't know. Okay. I don't know when all 2 got finalized, in fact. But that's a page and a half. So I'm trying to find out as to who did that kind of work, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to lay that, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to lay those 2 recommendations separate and apart on the table, so that members can view them if they want.
Thank you.
Ms.
Ms. Rodriguez.
I would appreciate seeing a copy of the reports that are being laid on the table. I've asked the policy advisor for her copy. Unfortunately, she didn't bring the 2012 with her. But what I would say to the honourable member, there is one inspection report for 2012 on behaviour. I think one of the issues that I recall and remember, the school inspection reports are not. That's not a ministry function. Those are carried out by a separate unit, in this case, the Educational Standards unit, who hired and worked alongside, as you said, a whole list of individuals within our system worked alongside Mr. David Moore in his review. I am aware that there were concerns that were drawn to my attention by Ms. Favorita Blanchard, which you identified as one of the lead inspectors. She is one of the full-time members of the inspection unit, was one of the last remaining ones at that time, who talked about concerns with judgments being made that were not backed up by evidence. And I am aware that she undertook to liaise with the inspector in regards to reviewing the report and making sure that it meets the standards that are established for every inspection report. So I haven't had a chance to look at what's been put in front of me here, but I can tell you that there is one report that was produced by the Educational Standards unit, and that is a report that is based on evidence that can be supported by by the evidence that was drawn from the findings of the individual responsible. And I remember in one of the statements that was drawn to my attention where the concerns were raised by the person on staff about the initial writing of the reports, there were statements, and this was one that stood out for me, and I don't know if it's in the draft that you're talking about, but there was a comment made about at John Gray High School that it was surprising to find that there was no manhood training at John Gray High School. That is, and I see the puzzled look on your faces, that was the kind of example of the issues that were raised by Ms. Favorita Blanchard about concerns with the writings of the report. So as I said before, there's not two reports. I am aware that there were issues raised about the quality of the report, which she ended up having to work on in liaison with Mr. David Moore to ensure that the reports were based on actual evidence, they focused on the scope of the review, and that they could be supported by the actual findings. But I have this in front of me, and I will have a look at what you're saying here. So,
Mr. Miller?
Mr. Chairman, I'm a little bit confused. I have two
I don't know what this.
November 2012 reports in front of me.
This is the sum.
One is 28 pages,
What is this?
and one is 15 pages. What appears to me to have happened is that the 28-page one
This is the 12.
contained certain statements, and I'll just quote from page 11 of that document. For instance, however, there can be significant variation in the commitment shown by staff and the quality of their teaching, organization of learning, and management of behavior. Consequently, students' experience of learning is uneven across and within year groups within the same school. Further down, in 3 primary schools, there were instances of teachers speaking aggressively to students, using sarcasm and embarrassing them in front of their peers. This caused resentment and did not set a good model of behavior for students to adopt. The other report from which the chief officer seems to be quoting with her recommendations, none of those statements appear, so there seems to have been
I don't know what
a cleanup exercise or the removal of, and is that what the chief officer is saying, that there was no evidence of these kind of matters and therefore these kind of statements was removed from the sterilized document from which she is quoting? Because I could quote other things that are in the 28-page document that are not in the 15-page document. I think we need to find out
we need to.
which is the real report. Is it a situation where the group that was asked to do it by Dr. David Moore prepared this 28-page report, and then Ms. Favorita Blanchard, who happens to be a staff member, as the chief officer just said, then decided they didn't like some of the things that were in this report, which all of the other people I would assume agreed to, and then she applied the evidence test and removed some of these statements from the report. Is that what happened?
For you, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, to the honorable member, what I'm seeing here in terms of the versions here do not coincide with what I received as chief officer as the finalized report. I am going to need to look into this to see. As I said before, I am aware, honorable members, that there were issues raised about the quality of the report and the information at some stage in the progress report not being able to be backed up by evidence. I am willing to undertake to see if I can come to the bottom of this, because one example that is shared here that's entitled New seems to be a summary of what is identified as an original report, and I know what we have in front here that was offered as the final report. So unfortunately, I will have to take the time to look and be able to respond on this.
Mr. Miller.
Through you, Mr. Chairman,
Might
is
be a draft.
Favorita Blanchard still employed? Can we talk to her?
She's no longer employed, and she is, I think, not necessarily on island. But if necessary, we can make contact with her, I'm sure. But she's not on island at the moment.
Are any of these other Caymanian teachers available so we can find out which is the real report that they all agree to?
Ms. Rodriguez.
Through you, Mr. Chair. As I said to the honourable member, having just gotten sight of these, I will need to undertake to see exactly what it is that these relate to, and if the House requires any individuals to comment on this. I'm certainly, as Chief Officer, I'm interested to find out exactly how these relate to the final report that was presented. So I too have questions, sir, that I will now need to investigate. I don't know if what's in front here is an earlier version of a draft report. I can't say it at this time, because what seems to be in front of me here is a summary part that's called new, and then there's an original, and I just need to be able to check out that.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I heard the Chief Officer correctly, you said that there was a report presented to you which Favorita Blanchard thought was not supported by evidence, which she edited using her experience and had evidence to prove the statements in the report wrong. Or she removed, I think, the sections of the report for which she did not believe there was evidence to support.
What I'm saying, honourable member, is that yes, there was a progress report or a draft report where she identified there were issues, and in the process of finalizing would have gone back to the evidence and made adjustments. And those adjustments would have been in relation to ensuring that the report fit the scope of the report, that there was evidence to back up the statements as said, and that, as with any inspection report, they're evidence-based. So there's not just statements that couldn't be backed up based on the actual observations recorded and reported. There's as part of the inspection process, that's what all team members do. They establish and they document through what we call the observation forms, which are then summarized and pulled together to form the final report.
And who authorized her to do that?
When she brought it to my attention that there were issues, and she shared a few examples, and as the one that I quoted does stand out in my mind, because I don't know if you're aware of my background, but in terms of inspections, I was a member of the original team that set up the school inspectorate. I was trained in Ofsted under their system, worked as a senior school inspector for 4 years, and then chief inspector of schools. So the quality of inspections, the importance of having reports that actually can be backed up by facts that are clear, that's a very, very important issue. So when she raised her concerns, of course, the response to her, well, if there are issues, then you need to go back to the evidence itself and make any adjustments that are needed.
Do you have any paper trail that shows a draft report prepared by this, agreed to by this committee, altered by Ms. Favorita Blanchard based on her experience and evidence therefore or evidence not there? And was this final report that she drafted referred back to the committee for their acceptance?
In terms of having a trail, obviously the inspection unit is not within the ministry, but that's one of the searches I would undertake to check out the emails, the trails on these reports. But I would need to go and investigate that, sir.
And you will include in that Ms. Favorita Blanchard's reference back to the original committee with her evidence proving their statements wrong and getting their agreement to it.
I will seek to find all information relating to what were the concerns that were raised and any of the process in making any changes to the report.
And how long do you anticipate that's going to take to do?
Oh, yeah. We'll break at 6 o'clock. We'll break at 6 o'clock. So if you want to defer the vote on this matter, and we move on to another one. So we'll defer the vote on this appropriation, and we'll move on to another one. Mr. Bush, you have a question?
Yes, did I hear the chief, the CEO, say that she was a training officer?
I was not, sorry. I was a senior inspector of schools and then chief inspector of schools.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to ask on that, but maybe I can find that elsewhere because I also want to find out who is on the school inspectorate now. Is there one? And when was the last time we had one? And prior to the last one, when was the last time we had one?
Mr. Chairman, is that where this has those questions on the inspector has to be asked here? Oh, well, I'm ready, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, through you, if the member is agreeable, we have another vote that deals with the education inspections and quality assurance, so I would prefer that that question would be dealt with then.
Fair enough.
So, Mr. Chairman, we have your concurrence that when we get there, we're not going to be short-circuited with this report. But that happened to us a couple of times this last couple of weeks going back here.
It's on EGA 10. The inspectorate comes on the EGA 10.
I think what the minister was saying is that the question would be more appropriately asked at EGA 10. Is that the correct appropriation, Minister Rivers?
Correct.
Yes, Mr. Chair, EGA 10
Thank you.
would be the more appropriate vote.
Okay, and we will move on from EGA 1. I think we're going to defer the vote on that until the chief officer can confirm as to which is the correct report. We will now move on to consider EGA 5, Primary Education Services. $20,606,114 on page 194. Are there any questions? EGA 5, Mr. Miller.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, could I inquire how the budget for the Northside Primary School is developed and how it gets incorporated into this vote?
Ms. Waller.
Thank you, sir. My name is Shirley Waller. I'm the Chief Education Officer. Through you, Chair, the budget for each of our schools is based on, first of all, staffing, on historical data with regards to other expenses, and then through a variety in various votes, we have developed, given that we are faced with the challenge of dividing up a limited set of resources as equitably as possible across our schools. We then look at the funds required for the staffing that's allocated for each school. When we look at support staffing, we have an equity model to determine what an equitable staffing allocation is across schools. And we do similarly for other funding like educational supplies. But largely, we look at, for example, past history on things like electricity, water, and those kinds of expenses.
Are the principal, was the principal and our staff of the Northside School involved in developing the budget for this year?
In terms of developing, looking at, for example, what capital items are requested by each school, we do get involvement of staff for that. In terms of how the budget that's allocated to the school is then spent, for example, in educational supplies, in extracurricular activity, in school library resources, and so on, those are wholly devolved to the schools to decide how to use the funding that is available. But the funding is allocated to schools against this equity model. Yes, sir.
You say it's done on an equity model, but really the principal and teachers of the Northside Primary School or Edna M. Moyle Primary School are not involved of the budget for supplies and everything else. You at the ministry calculate that based on your historical knowledge.
Chair, through you, while some aspects of the budget are done on a historical basis, for example, electrical expenses, utilities in general, and so on, staffing is allocated on the basis of an equity staffing model. So we look at the salaries for the actual staff that we have, or if we have vacancies, we know approximately where we typically appoint across, and we know the salary grade for the post. So we calculate the salaries and the associated costs for personnel. But when we look at educational supplies and other such funding, we try to share that equitably across schools.
Staff and the salaries thereof, I can understand because that is established under the central government. How do you make adjustments for teachers' methods and their utilization of different supplies to teach children if the teachers themselves are not asked to prepare a budget for their supplies?
Through you, Chair, what we do is we give the funding to the school, but then the school is free to decide how to use that funding. So we do not, for example, say to teachers, you must buy this much construction paper, or this much in the way of crayons, and so on. But what we try to do is to make sure that schools across the country have an equitable share of the resources that are available.
How can you determine, I get back to the original question, how can you determine what funding is necessary if the teachers are not allowed to submit a funding request based on their needs for their supplies and their method of teaching?
Mr. Chair, if I may perhaps explain the thinking behind this. For example, we could have a teacher who chose to say, well, I am unable to teach in any other way but by having 4 interactive whiteboards in my classroom.
No, don't get ridiculous. No, please, ma'am. No teacher would ask for 4 interactive whiteboards in a classroom. So let's not go to one extreme or the other, please. Okay?
If I may, I have actually seen a classroom that operated in that way. Nevertheless, so I didn't pick it out of thin air.
In Northside?
No, sir. But I am using the more general. I'm using a more general example. In other words, what we do is allocate the funding, not the items, but the funding, as equitably as possible to the school, so that they then have the freedom to decide how to use that funding to buy the resources that they need.
If you don't ask the teachers in the Edna Moyle School, how do you determine that the funding which you have given them before, let's take 2013, 2014. Last year, when I was asking you the specific question, is the Northside Primary School, what it was called at that time, properly resourced, and you were telling me yes, I was getting a request from the teachers to donate $2,000 to buy books for the teachers to teach from. How do you determine how much the PTAs, the parents, the other people in the community have contributed to the supplies needed to run the Northside School if you don't ask the teachers?
Through your chair, what we do have is an allocation of funding from the government, which we then share as equitably as possible across our schools. I don't know how else to explain that. I hear what you're saying, sir, but what we are attempting to do is to give schools some latitude in how they use the money that we have available for them. And we agreed several years ago with principals a funding model for allocating educational supplies. Now, capital expenses, we do differently. We do ask schools what their urgent needs are for capital supplies. But what we try to do is ensure that when it comes to recurrent expenditures, that those are apportioned fairly across schools.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, what is the spend per child in Cayman Brac, and what is the spend per child in Grand Cayman?
For
primary schools?
For resources? Or more generally, sir?
Generally, total.
When we look at educational supplies, for example, and we look across our schools, the per child spend is approximately equivalent in Northside and in Cayman Brac. When we look at the total spend, there is a greater discrepancy. For example, if we look at the recurrent costs for children in Cayman Brac, in primary schools, that spend is currently around $11,986 per child. In Northside, that same spend is, apologize, I'm slow, but the numbers are small. That spend is approximately $10,094 per child. And that has more to do with the staffing per child ratio. So you can see it's roughly the same, but because the schools in Cayman Brac are smaller, the staffing ratios cause it to be a bit more expensive.
How did you calculate those numbers?
Certainly, those are numbers which look at recurrent costs.
6,000, no, sorry.
The recurrent costs, which is a fairly standard thing. We look at what are the recurrent costs, including things like personnel and resources and annual expenditures. Those do not include, for example, the facilities costs, which vary more per school from year to year, so it's harder to get an equitable arrangement, and most jurisdictions remove those from the annual cost per child in terms of calculations. For example, in the UK and in the US, when you look at the annual expenditure per child, those will be the recurrent expenditures, not the capital expenditures.
So based on the numbers you just gave me,
Yes, sir.
if we have 80 children in Northside Primary School, Northside can expect that $800,000 of this $20 million will be spent in Northside School next year.
In actual fact, sir, the total allocated funding for Northside, including some of the things that come out of that, the things like depreciation and so on, which we don't include in that recurrent spend, the actual figure for Northside is $1,096,000.
That's only for supplies and staff, that's not capital.
No, that includes some of those other central costs, but as I said, it's a bit more. But your calculation is roughly right. It's about $800,000 in terms of what it would be for those recurrent costs.
What was the amount last year?
I don't have that broken out for last year, but it was roughly the same. There's very little change in our budget from last year.
Mr. Chairman, I guess we'll deal with the capital under the larger capital vote. You want me to ask the questions here about the Northside School and its capital, or would you prefer I wait to that? Because they mightn't be here when we do those EI and what's in the back.
No, they should be here when we do those.
Okay.
It's up to the minister whether she wants you to ask it now or...
Mr. Chair, I'd rather just deal with the vote to hand and wait on the capital questions when we're dealing with that.
Thank you.
Over to you,
Mr. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to try to restrict mine to East End on this particular vote as well. The Chief Education Officer has just given some comparative costs to educate children in the primary school in Cayman Brack versus Grand Cayman, Northside. I wonder if she could do the same for East End for me.
Yes, sir. I will have to do the math in my head. I have the per child
Oh, that's
figures.
dangerous.
Yes, sir, it is. But I will give you my numbers so you can check my math. I actually have the details for Cayman Brack, but I haven't broken it down per school. But for East End, when we look at the costs for East End, it is it is $963,375 in terms of all of our budget, and you have just over 100 students. So the calculation there would be around $9,000 per student.
Why the big difference?
That has to do with the utility costs and some of the other contractual costs per school. The biggest variation in our schools has to do with the cost of staffing, and the per child cost actually goes down as the school gets larger. If you think about it, Northside and East End have the same number of teachers, but East End is a somewhat larger school.
And how many students do we have, Cayman Brack?
In Cayman Brack at the moment, in Creek Primary School, we have 45 students. In Spot Bay Primary School, 38. In West End Primary School, 54. So relevant to this vote, that's 92, 137 primary school students.
Why is it that we got 3 schools in Cayman Brack?
I think that's a historic factor, sir.
So history continue to repeat itself? You just said that there is a break-even point, I assume. The more kids you have, the cost is driven down.
There's certainly economies of scale.
Yeah, the economies of scale. Would that not be the same in Cayman Brack if we had one primary school?
Through you, Chair, one would certainly assume that depending on how you structure that school, that the per student cost would go down. The consideration, however, is whether or not any capital costs would be incurred to create the infrastructure that would allow one school. At this point, there is no one primary school in Cayman Brack that would be able to accommodate 137 students.
Why is that? They all in one class or what?
No, sir. In terms of just the physical space, some of the classrooms in the Cayman Brack primary schools are very small. So they've historically had fairly small classes. So accommodating one site to accommodate 137 children, I think would require some capital expenditure.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, if I may say to the Chief Education Officer, I witnessed a graduation at East End School last week, and then I witnessed a talent show over the weekend, which was well represented by the parents. It was one of the most enjoyable evenings of my life in a very long time. The talent that was displayed there with the musical instruments and the dance routines, and they were crowned the Miss and the Master. And the abilities of these kids were overwhelming. And they weren't from grade 2. I think the kid from grade 2 won the Mister. So that just tells you. Despite all of the challenges that this school experienced earlier to start the year out, and it's still experiencing a number of challenges, what is the department doing to alleviate some of these challenges? Because there are a number of areas that it's still not adequately staffed during the day.
Through you, Chair, one of the challenges that we faced across our schools is that our per student or our students per teacher staffing ratios have steadily climbed over the last several years. We have actually fewer staff than we did 5 years ago, and we have about nearly 30% more students. So some of those challenges persist. We do make every attempt to, again, share those resources we have to try to make sure that all schools have their essential needs addressed. So we constantly work with regards to trying to make sure that those resources are shared. But there is no question that we have some challenges. We have worked very hard this year to try to avoid some of the challenges that we faced at the beginning of this school year. But we are always vulnerable as long as there is not an excess pool of teachers on island. We are always vulnerable, for example, to late resignations.
Mr. Chairman, I think I should try to go back to my selfishness and point out that in this instance, I am not addressing the global, national problem that you're having. I am being a little bit selfish here, and I want to address my constituency because of every one of you saying that it's too far away from you, and we are in many ways dependent upon ourselves. And I should publicly thank Ms. Wallace now for all her work over the last 3 or so years that she has been, I think 3 or 4 years. We have seen it grow, and you were there on the day of graduation, and it talked about the successes of that school, the academic successes over the last year. You were right there. I have followed that. I have been an integral part of that success. Thank God I could. But, Mr. Chairman, I wonder if the Minister can, Chief Education Officer, can tell us when, because I can do so much, I can't do no more. I reach a point where I get frustrated and I can't provide the financial resources to do things like installing a generator. The policy decision in this country on education is that we are going to air condition our schools so our children can be comfortable. Now, the only one that doesn't have a suitable generator is my school. The generator is sitting down someplace in some storeroom for the last few years. Now, I wouldn't mind knowing when your department is going to try to coordinate with the hazard management to see if you can get this installed. Because if not, I'll get those people in East End to try and put the pipes in and the building in.
Mr. Chair, I'll have to seek some specialist advice on that. Mr. Chair, this is the concern about the generator is one that we're going to have to look into, but we will follow up on it as quickly as possible.
Mr. Chairman, is she saying that, what are you saying? Is that the generator is suitable at the school or?
Mr. Chair, I think the challenge that we have is that this is not a concern of which we were aware, but we will follow up on it.
I am stumped by that one.
Mr. Chair, if I could just ask for some clarification. Is the issue that the generator is not physically present or that is not properly hooked up?
Oh, there is one physically present,
Okay.
but hang on now. Don't get excited. What happened was that generator was put in there 40 years ago? 69? Is that it? Well, what that is? 69, 70s. And it's a little lister, a 3-cylinder that can run a couple outlets for hurricane. We have since increased the capacity with 3-phase. I see the facilities manager behind there who knows that we install an elevator, we install kitchen, all 3-phase, and part of that development was to put in this generator in collaboration with the hazard management. The school is now off of the hurricane shelter list because the generator hasn't been installed. But forget about it being off that. What is important is that in times of outages, whether they are planned or unplanned, our children have to go out in the yard, unlike the rest of the schools.
Right. Mr. Chair, this is something that we will have to follow up on. I will say, however, that by no means do all of our schools have generators that can power the entire school. But we will certainly nevertheless follow up on this for East End.
Mr. Chairman, I'm talking about power the entire school. I understand what emergency generators are about, but this can't power nothing. Mm-hmm. This can't power anything. I mean, literally nothing where the school has advanced to that point. There was a point there was not even an air conditioning in East End School. We had to leave the windows open. It was okay then to plug in a kettle or something, but that's not the case now. All our computers work off this thing. What are we to do? Disrupt the whole school if we're down electricity for 2 days?
Thank you. Mr. Eden had a question first. Mr. Eden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a couple of them. In the International IB program, how is that progressing? Which schools are it in? Is it in now? And the standards that which is it from school to school? How is it assessed and graded, etc.?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, we have 3 schools now that have achieved the initial stage of, they've gone through authorization as primary years program International Baccalaureate schools. Those 3 schools are Sir Johnny Cumber Primary School, Prospect Primary School, and Savannah Primary School. All of those schools are now in the process of preparing for verification, and the deadline for that next stage is between 2.5 years out when they'll receive the next assessment. To that purpose, we have been doing some work with the leadership of schools in terms of preparing them for the next stage, and they are progressing towards it.
Thank you. This is another question differently. My concern is, and I've heard a number of teachers went away, came back, trained, started in the system for a year or two, and I don't want to use the word frustrated, but seem to just come out of the system. How is that being looked at and expectations to encourage these young teachers? Because I know many of them extremely good in the early days and then just seem to pander out.
Through you, Chair, we do have a program to help our newly qualified teachers through the use of mentor teachers in the schools adjust to working in the system. I would say, however, that in talking to our Caymanian teachers, one of the major sources of frustration for them has to do with salary and the difficulties that they face in moving up in terms of salary increases. And that is very much a challenge. But in terms of the actual settling in and making the adjustment to a career in teaching, we have done a great deal of work through our mentors with helping them and, to settle into teaching, and that is on the table again for next year, and actually we're looking to expand and upgrade that program.
Just the last comment, Mr. Chairman, through you to the minister and the entire Legislative Assembly. As I said in my throne speech, I would advocate that wherever possible and as soon as we have the funds to help the teachers and also the nurses and people in the healthcare provision in these islands, the time and effort that they spend with our children, I think we need to start rewarding them.
Thank you, Mr. Eden. I'll take these in the order in which I've seen it. Ms. Rivers, you want to make a clarification?
Just a comment to Mr. Eden's plea, and the member would or may recall in my contribution as well as that of the Deputy Governor that I had asked for that consideration to be given by the Deputy Governor and the Chief Officer to look at what can be done with respect to the whole administrative arrangements, including remuneration, et cetera, as it relates to teachers and some of the, I guess, unintended consequences of the policies that were adopted with respect to civil service, the civil service regime and how it's adversely affected our teachers. And I have received a commitment, as we've heard from the Deputy Governor, that they will be looking at that and to take forward a proposal to then be given to myself, which I will then share with caucus and cabinet, and hopefully we'll be able to, for a policy decision to be made in that regard.
Mr. Kirkconnell, you had a point.
Thank you,
and then Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, to the Minister, is education mandatory in the Cayman Islands?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Yes, the compulsory age for education is outlined in the law, and if I'm not mistaken, it's a year from the age of, I think the law specifies 9 to 16 or 17. I know there's been some moves to move it to 17, whether it's actually codified in the current law, I'd have to just double check. But there is a mandatory age for education in the Cayman Islands, yes.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, based on some of the previous questions, Cayman Brac is part of the Cayman Islands, right?
Absolutely.
There were yourself and some of your staff attended the Lehman Scott High School graduation Saturday night. Can you speak to this committee about the results at that graduation from that high school?
Mr. Chair, through you, I would speak, I think, in addition to the Lehman Scott High School graduation, the results were quite impressive, but I have to state also that with respect to Clifton Hunter High School and John Gray High School, there were also some very impressive results in all of our high schools this year. So I think that the quality and standard of education, whereas we recognize there's still room for improvement, we have seen some advances with respect to the results that we're getting from the schools and the number of qualifications that our students are actually graduating with. So that is a very encouraging sign, and it actually helps me personally as Minister of Education to continue to do what I'm doing with respect to fighting for the needs of our children in the education system.
Where did Lehman Scott High School rank compared to the other high schools?
Mr. Chair, I will have to defer to the Minister, or the Chief Education Officer to talk about the ranking, if that is something that we do within our system currently.
Mr. Chair, if I may say so, the results for this year, in terms of the overall results for the graduates, we still have some examination results coming in August. So it would be premature to say exactly how one school or the other ranks for this year, sir. I will say, in response to the question by the Honorable Deputy Premier, if I may, that last year, for the first time, the results in Grand Cayman actually challenged those in Cayman Brac, which I believe has spurred on Lehman Scott High School to push this year's graduates to even further heights. But we have also seen, as the minister has said, extraordinary results from both Clifton Hunter and John Gray. So it may be, sir, a neck-and-neck race, which I am very, very happy to see. But certainly the preliminary results from Lehman Scott this year are outstanding. And if I may just cite one figure, already 85% of the students at Lehman Scott High School have passed CXC English, which is one of our indicator subjects.
Ms. Waller, could you give me an absolute figure as to what constitutes 85%, ma'am?
Certainly, sir. What we mean by that is that 85%...
No, I know what 85%.
Okay. No, sir.
I'm quite comfortable with math. What I'm asking you is...
What is the basis?
85 out of 100 is 85%.
Yes, sir.
I can also use a smaller figure and still achieve 85%. What is the absolute... Can you listen to the question before we try to answer it?
Yes, sir.
What is the absolute figure that equates to 85%? If you could give us that number. Out of the number of students overall, what number equates to 85%?
I have with me the percentages because it allows us to compare, so I do not know, but what I can tell you is the process by which it is calculated, and that is that 85% of the entire year 12 cohort has achieved that rate. In terms of the number, I can do the math, but I don't actually have that on a piece of paper, sir.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman, I was the one who asked the question about Cayman Brac. And I think it's fair that I see the Deputy Premier jumped into it to try to make it something out of it. It was not with any intention. And I can see, and we all know, that Cayman Brac has an advantage over our people here in Cayman because of the small class sizes. They get individual attention. So what do you expect? No, it is time we have the same class sizes in Grand Cayman. Let's compete for compete's sake.
So, Mr. Chairman,
ladies and gentlemen,
can I ask the question?
Mr. Bush, yes,
what
sir.
are the class sizes in Cayman Brac?
Ms. Waller, the question has been asked. What are the sizes of the classes in Cayman Brac?
In terms of, Mr. Chairman, if I may clarify the question, are we now talking about primary school or high school?
High school.
We are...
In high school.
For the sake of clarification, we are considering the primary education at this stage.
Yes.
And for some reason, the secondary passes have been brought into the equation. So, having brought that into the discussion, answer both questions.
Certainly.
Primary and secondary.
The average class size in primary school in Cayman Brac is approximately 10 students. The average class size in secondary school is approximately 12 students.
And in Cayman, Mr. Chairman? And in Cayman, Mr. Chairman?
Sorry, just for clarification, Chairman, these are the class sizes, not the year cohort sizes. The year cohort for Lehman Scott High School this year was 26 students. In terms of the class...
Can you please explain to those of us who aren't involved in education, what is the difference between a class size and a year cohort? The listening public has obviously heard what you said and would be as confused as I am.
Certainly, sir. The year cohort is how many students we have in each year group. So the graduating class in Cayman Brac this year was 26 students.
Mr. Chairman, I've asked a question. Can I get a question in, Mr. Chairman?
She's coming up. She's coming up.
On average, and if I may just check my numbers, and I will give you the class sizes, but on average, The average class sizes in Grand Cayman range in primary schools from as small as, on average, just about 13 in North Side on average, about 11 North Side and 13 in East End, all the way up to approximately 25 students per class.
High school I'm talking about.
In Prospect. The average in the high schools in Grand Cayman is approximately 18 students.
Average.
Average, sir.
In high schools?
In the high schools, yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, all I want to do is congratulate the staff in Cayman Brac for doing an excellent job. At the same time, we congratulate those who have made tremendous improvement in Cayman. We know predominantly the Brac has always been good, until last year when Cayman did made some real good improvements as well. But we got to really congratulate those people at the Brac as well.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Of course.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, in reviewing the budget, I noticed that there's quite substantial votes for security. For instance, 15,000 Georgetown Primary School, 100,000 John A. Comber Primary School, 20,000 Bordentown Primary School, 10,000 Lighthouse School, 30,000 Red Bay Primary School, 38,000 Prospect Primary School. These figures are cumulatively used in this $20 million budget to inflate the cost of a child in Northside, because there's no security for Northside Primary School.
Through you, Chair. When we calculate the cost the cost within a school, then we only attribute to that the cost for that cost center. But in that case, because there is no security cost for Northside, that actually reduces the cost per child in Northside.
Mr. McTaggart first, then Mr. Suku.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to get back to the topic at hand, which is the vote for the primary education services, and to Mrs. Waller, the Chief Education Officer. You mentioned there are 3 schools that are primary schools that are accredited now with for the IB. Can you tell us what is the strategy of the department with regard to the other primary schools with regard to the rollout of the IB program amongst those schools as well?
Mr. Chair, we have, I guess we have a political steer on this as well, which is very much in favor of the primary years program, but with a focus on getting those schools in which it's already been initiated working well, and then looking as resources allow for further rollout.
Mr. Suku?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wonder if the Chief Education Officer could let me know what the status is with the Bordentown Primary School Library currently?
Mr. Chair, through you, the Bordentown Primary School Library has a fair stock of book resources. We actually worked with the school to help it develop some additional resources in terms of books. The challenge that they have had is that there is, there's no dedicated librarian for Bordentown, as is true for virtually all of our schools, for most of our schools. And they have been lucky enough to have gotten a volunteer to come in and provide some support. So their library is very close to being ready to go online now. So a great deal of work has been done by some very, very helpful volunteers.
Thank you. Mrs. Waller, with respect to support teachers or assistant teachers at the primary school level, how many do you have in the primary school system, the public primary school system?
I'll have to, Mr. Chair, I'll have to check the actual numbers. The in terms of the total complement, we have altogether around 110 assistant teacher, support assistant, special support assistant posts across the entire system. And those are distributed based on a combination of factors. The largest single placement for those staff members is in the reception classes, where the staffing model requires one adult for every 12 children, which therefore means that our reception classes essentially all have assistant teacher or a special support assistant, special support aide in the classroom. We also strive to place, to allocate teachers.
How many do you have in the primary school system?
In the primary school systems, we have around 110 posts.
Right. Now, not including special needs teachers or whatever the case be, just the assistant teachers or the support teachers, those individuals who would be in the classroom assisting the teacher, so that if a class had 27 students, as you've said for Georgetown, that's what you indicated. You said the larger schools, Prospect.
If I may, Prospect has class sizes, average class sizes around 25. In Georgetown, it's a smaller ratio. The actual ratio per student there is around 14.
Georgetown Primary has
Georgetown
14
Primary, yes, sir.
Per student.
Teachers, the students per teacher, yes, sir.
What would be your largest? What would be your smallest that would average out to 14?
In terms of the class size, I would have to look at that, sir. Those allocations are done on a school-by-school basis. I can do some general calculations for you, though.
That's okay. I'm going there shortly. I'll confirm.
Yes, sir.
The question is, of the individuals who are in the classroom assisting the teacher, how many of those do you have across the public school system?
We have...
Public primary school system.
Yes, sir. We have, as I said, approximately 110.
No, Ms. Waller.
Yes, sir.
Not including special teachers, not including those that would help with special needs children. I'm talking about the assistant that is in the class helping the teacher control the children, the teacher's aides. If I'm getting the terms correct, the teacher's aide. How many of those do you have in a public primary school system? It cannot be 110.
If I may, Chair, there's no sharp distinction made between those assistant teachers or special support assistants who work with special needs students versus those who assist teachers.
Okay, let us accept your number that is 110 across the public primary school system. How are they allocated? What are the numbers at each school?
If you would just give me a moment, Chair, and I will find those the allocation for you.
Ms. Waller, I realize that it's probably taking some time.
Yes, sir.
I will ask you that when we do take the break, if you would use the break to try to find that number for me.
I will, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Mr. Eden?
As I sit here and reflect and I visit some of the schools, I have a degree of concern on deterioration of the behavior in some of these children. I don't know whether Ms. Waller or the minister make comment as we go forward with the human rights aspect of this while we continue to lose children that not properly disciplined for whatever reason. I know it's a wide open question, and I really don't expect anything specific, but I do have concern of what's happening in our primary schools. And by the time they get to the high school, it's not good.
Mr. Chair, through you, as I've been talking about, as I said in the House and again in my contribution to the debate, the whole issue of behavior and the management of behavior in the schools is something that we're looking very carefully and closely at in terms of what we need to do to roll out a system that addresses some of those concerns that have been long-standing, as the member has mentioned. There is specific strategies that are going to be put in place, and I will ask the policy advisor, the senior policy advisor for inclusion, to kind of talk about some of the strategies that are planned for the coming year. Those strategies, just generally speaking, will include both training for for teachers and how to deal with behavior-related issues, as well as having clear expectations from the student's perspective and from the parent's perspective as to what is going to be acceptable behavior in the schools.
Through you, Chair, we've focused on some specific expectations with regards to strengthening behaviour in schools. We've worked on a student code of conduct, and we're very keen that parents are partners with schools, so we've revised the homeschool agreement and set a national policy expectation, and we will also be looking at rewards and sanctions, but most importantly we've be working with staff to help them set these expectations, follow through. Obviously, praise and reward and motivate good behaviour is always the starting point. So we're trying to what we call strengthen our universal tier, because we'd like to introduce a more tiered approach and continuum to support children with managing their behaviour, to develop their taking responsibility from themselves. Our primary schools and those IB primary schools actually have particular values and characteristics that they work towards that encourages children to develop the skills that they need to manage their behaviour in future life.
Mr. Chairman, I heard a lot about what the structure we are putting in place for children. What about teachers that do not comply? Do you want mic right in front here?
Through you, Chair, one of the key things that we've done in terms of managing appropriate behaviors in staff is to put in place the national standards for teachers in our schools. And those form the basis of performance management. So there was a great deal of work done around the national standards for teachers, a great deal of work done both in terms of having teachers aware of those standards, but also around the training on the performance management that follows with it. And there's some very clear expectations about the attitudes and attributes that we expect from teachers.
Chairman, I wonder when those performance standards were put in place?
2 years. Mr. Chair, it was 2 years ago, but certainly the first year was very much a transition year of working towards making sure that everyone understood those standards and how to apply them in terms of the performance management, and developing a performance management tool that was better suited to dealing with teachers and that reflected the really key aspects of a teacher's work, as opposed to using a much more generic performance management tool that was really designed to be more for a general civil servant rather than a teacher.
And there are certain achievements laid out in there that they must achieve, certain standards of achievement.
Mr. Chair, there is a published set of national standards for teachers. In addition to those standards, which are standards for behavior and attitudes, that for all teachers, individual teachers will have targets. And part of the performance management is also looking at how well the students that they are teaching are actually progressing.
And are they achieving those standards?
Mr. Chair, if I could just ask for clarification, are we speaking about the teachers or the students in terms of achieving the standards?
Teachers.
The teachers. Mr. Chair, through you, generally speaking, most of our teachers are achieving the standards. Where there are deficits, however, what we do have now is a tool that allows us to very clearly identify those deficits and those to be dealt with, not just on the basis of an individual performance issue, but against the national standards.
Mr. Chairman, this question is very loaded. Mr. Chairman, how many out of all our teachers are adjusting to the new technological age to teach our children?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a question which is not one that's a yes-no answer, in that while we have a great many of our teachers for who have adapted very well to technologies such as interactive whiteboards, one gauge of it is the degree to which our teachers are able to engage with the integrated student information management system. One of the things that's been implemented over the last year and a half is that now every single teacher is expected to interact with the SIM system on a daily basis to be able to enter student data with regards to attendance and behavior into the system daily. That is not by any means the only gauge of how well our teachers are using technology, but it is an indicator that all of our teachers are now engaging with technology on a daily basis.
Yeah, but Mr. Chairman, really, being able to enter on a computer can be taught in a few minutes. Being able to impart certain knowledge through that computer, whiteboards and what have you, you really think it's acceptable in today's age that our teachers, you said some of them are not capable of even looking at the whiteboard. They don't even know what it is, almost.
Mr. Chair, I don't think I actually said that.
No, but that's why I'm putting on it. You go ahead and do what you got to do.
No, but we have rolled out quite a lot of training with regards to interactive whiteboards and other technologies. We have had a range of workshops, online PD, and a lot of work going on in individual schools with our teachers. It is a steeper learning curve for some teachers than for others, but generally speaking, the level of technological competence in our teachers has been rising steadily over the last several years.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask the Chief Education Officer, why don't we have interactive whiteboards in every classroom?
Mr. Chair, the issues around funding and particular capital funding for schools, I think, are well known. Certainly, we are working towards adding technological capacity, but that's always within the available resources.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I think this is an opportune time to take the evening break. And I think perhaps if there are no more questions, then maybe we should vote on this appropriation. Okay, Mr. Miller, one more question.
Can the Chief Education Officer say how many requests for supplies have been denied from the Northside School during the current financial year, and if their equity division has allowed for that increase for next year? Because I note the total vote is decreased.
Mr. Chair, to the best of my knowledge, no requests for educational supplies have been denied. That is not to say that all resources requested were available from the supplier, but none have been denied based on the funding that was allocated to the school that I am aware of.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, then I'll proceed to taking the vote. So all those in favor of EGA 5, Primary Education Services, $20,606,114, standing par with the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Aye. And those against, no. Thank you. We will now suspend proceedings for approximately, well, we'll just suspend proceedings until you all have had time to have something to eat, and then we will come back. I know everyone is tired. I have asked them to provide for everyone in here, so everyone is taken care of.